Right. Right. It says live. Just making sure it's not.
This is not the first time.
Not our first rodeo.
This is modeling, man. You leave your feelings in the truck.
I had a brookie before.
Okay, can you enlighten us on what that is?
Yeah, what is that? English, please.
It's a brownie cookie.
No surprise there.
Jonathan Bananatham.
Okay.
Sounding groggy. Skelford Tail Model World. You can read mine because I'm a shit reader.
Whatever. We all love the accent.
Gee golly willikers.
Well, football season's here. Am I here now?
You're here now. That's a hot take for the posse.
Welcome to episode 53 of the Triple P. We're excited to bring you another round of discussions, a bit of banter, as well as a great interview. JB and Scott had a chance to sit with our friend Jon Bryon, and you won't want to miss it. Speaking of Scott, he ain't here, but the rest of us are. JB, Ivan, TJ, and Grant have joined me, Doug, and we're ready to roll. Grant, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's after a week of 112 degrees here in Southern California, it's actually raining outside now. We have a storm hitting us finally. We got some modeling done, working on a couple figures, but overall it's been good.
Awesome. How about you, TJ?
I'm doing well. Just getting some modeling done. A little disappointed. I was supposed to go to a show tomorrow in Pennsylvania with our friend Jackson, but I forgot I double booked myself and I had prior commitments to go to a concert with a good friend of mine, so I didn't want to back out on him just because I already paid for the tickets. So I'll have that going for me tomorrow, and hopefully I can finish one of the kits I was working on.
Awesome. Ivan, tell us what's up.
Not a lot. We're experiencing a lot of rain and a lot of thunderstorms over here at the minute. It's delightful. The mojo's slowly returned, doing a bit of work on a base that I'm doing for Machine & Krieger build, using resin 2-part water, which I found out gets extraordinarily hot, but I'll talk about that later. But just working on a base and slowly working away at some models.
Cool. JB?
Doing well here. We had the Tiger build along last weekend, which I'll talk about, and I think within the last couple of days, I've had a lot of work to do and not a lot of time, but I have had time for some retail therapy. So some packages are coming from Andy's and Sprue Brothers for some kits that I am super stoked about. The VT1-2. I know TJ picked one up, the double barrel modern German thing. I actually saw the real one in Koblenz. So it's really cool to see that in plastic. So those get here tomorrow, and I think I'm going to slam it over the weekend.
Awesome. Well, I've managed to keep building while I'm here. I have my son with his family live with us, and they had a baby on Wednesday. So the house is nuts. There are now 4 children, including an infant, in my home, and that wasn't supposed to happen. But it's all right. We love them all. But I managed to get downstairs into the room at the bench every night, and I'll talk a little bit more later about what I'm doing. It's been a hoot.
Since we started the Triple P just over 2 years ago, several more podcasts have joined us in the OG Modeling Podcast. If you want to tune in, head on over to modelpodcast.com. You'll find links to all of them.
The Plastic Posse is sponsored by Tankcraft, makers of highly realistic aftermarket 3D printed tank tracks in 35th scale. Tankcraft Pro Tracks are as real as it gets. They're not just copies of previously produced model parts. The designs are based on real tracks that come from measurements and photographs. Once modeled 1-to-1, they are scaled down to 35th scale, test fitted on all major brands, and we can personally say that these tracks are high quality and super detailed. Layer lines are practically invisible to the naked eye, and cleanup is a breeze. Actually, there's no cleanup. Go on over to tankcraft.com. That's TANKRAFT.com. Your bench will thank you. Remember, Posse fans get 15% off their first order by using the code POSSE15 at checkout.
very special thanks goes to our Patreon supporters. They include our Deputy Marshals, Aaron Larson, Paul Burdett, Mark Ewing, Ted Kawahara, Brandon Gentry, Jonathan Bryan, Scale Model Hanger, Chris Toadman Hughes, Model Doc, Doug Reed, Greg James, Dan Knopfel, Les Workala, B Colt 1911, John Everett, John Anderson, Josh Book, Black Rifle Model Works, Thomas Bannock, Mark Bradley, Zach Peace, Joel Munson, Josh Orr, Eric Brubaker, David Bryan Bridges, Ethan Eidenmill, Jared Cowell, JC Osborne, Mike Talley, Steve Baker, Bruce the Model Noob, Jeremy Moore, and Rick Cooper.
The Posse foremen are, and if I screw up your name, I'm really sorry, John Colsonak, Toby Kane, Matthew Flegel, Damon Rigby, Kian McCullen, Papa Mike Charlie. Oh, that's pretty cool. Charlie McCain, Tim H., Robert Klein, Michael Lebro, Greg Williams, J.A.K., Ash Whitehouse, Aaron Cook, Steve Matheson, Cody Kuriski, David Bozeman, Previous Seat, Ian Bonner, Lee Fogel, Mr. Grizz, Rob Burnside, Martin Drayton, the voice of Bob, Steve Schaefer, Steve Munsell, Matthew Johnson, John Vickus, Jamie Stokes, Craig Jacob, Mike Bird, Jeremy Elliott, Mediocre Age Modeler, that's pretty much all of us, Eric Doggish, Rick Lewis, Paul Wheeler, and Eric Sebelmeyer.
In the Posse Outriders, Paul, Pete, Lynn, Pat, Daniel, Warren, Neil, Jackson, Robert, Brian, Matthew, David, Zach, Ashley, and Jamie.
If you'd like to support the Triple P and become a Posse Outrider, go to patreon.com/Plastic Posse Podcast, where you can set up a recurring donation, which helps us offset the cost of bringing you the show. There are 3 tiers starting at just $1 a month.
All right. So speaking of Patreon, we had a little event last weekend, and I'd love to talk about it. It's over Labor Day weekend in the United States. I hosted a Tiger build-along. So I will say and apologize to our listeners. It really wasn't what I intended it to be. At first, the onset of the project was like, hey, let's do a build-along. I'll videotape. It'll be step-by-step on how building the Tiger, works. And, everybody can be there and hang out and talk. Now, that said, after about the first 7 minutes, it turned into something completely different, and it really just became a hangout. And we built the models. There were a lot of people there. I think I counted 22 on Friday. That was our max number, and we can host up to 100 with Zoom. But I was really surprised at that many people. It was a lot of fun. On Friday, gosh, there were some MVPs from the weekend, but we had a ton of Patreon supporters and friends stop by. Zach and Grizz, MVPs. Mark Bradley, fantastic to have him along board. I think we were all jealous of his food that he was constantly getting delivered. The one night was ribs. Oh, so good. I about drove out to his house and stole it. In addition to that, we had Eric Brubaker, another MVP for the whole weekend, chiming in and out throughout the days. We had Dan Knopfel, his wife and son on as well, which was great. Scott stopped by. TJ was there. Ivan, and I'm sorry I'm listing all these names because I really think they should be listed. John Everett, Doc Anderson stopped by, Josh Orr, Josh Buck. The list goes on and on. Robert Klein, and I'm sure I missed some people, but it was honestly a really great time. And I don't think I've ever spent that much time at the bench in that short amount of time. So we started Friday, and I think we went almost to Monday night. I was fortunate. I had an empty house. My only obligation was to a dog and cat, but it was really fun. I mean, some of the nights, it honestly, I was talking to Jackson about it. It really felt like nationals because we were up till, 1, 2 in the morning and just talking about models, building, having a good time. And I think what was great is we really got to know each other on a personal level. And that's why when I initially said we'd record it and share it, I'm not going to do that because, again, we had a lot of personal conversations. We got to know each other a lot, family, background, profession, and that stuff we're just going to keep private. That doesn't need to be out there. But what we've learned is that this is something that could turn into something more with the Posse. So definitely look out for that. I made a post a few weeks back. Hey, would you be interested in a online type of club? And meetings at some frequency. I think there's merit to that, not only based on the responses, but also the activity that we had throughout the weekend, which was a ton of fun. And I can't wait to do it again. And that said, for Patreons, I will do some recordings and share them. In that case, it'll kind of be me one-on-one, and I'll make sure it's pushed over. As we look towards these group settings, it's just fun to get to know people. And I think we'll have a Plastic Posse hang more often than not.
Yeah, I was only fortunate enough to join one night because unfortunately it timed itself. It was the weekend I started work.
I was going to say, you got a job.
Yeah. Well, we're not talking about that.
Sorry to be a downer. I feel like I just blew up your whole world right there.
Anyway, so yeah, I was only fortunate enough to join one night, but that one night was extraordinarily fun. I think it tied itself in with the hotel bookings.
Oh, yes.
Which we'll talk about again soon. But the feedback from the Tiger Build, I think actually it worked out better as just a massive group hangout than actually a recorded session. I think this was much better. Like you said, people got to know each other, hang out. People who don't get to clubs, it's like this was a virtual club and it was amazing. It was a fun time. And like I said, till like 2 a.m. your time sometimes.
Yeah, what was really great is it was interesting how the conversations matured. So, the first Friday afternoon, because we started around 6 p.m. Mountain, and it was a little quiet. I did most of the talking, and I think everybody was kind of just feeling it out, getting to know each other. But, some people jumped in, Mark Bradley, Eric Brubaker, Josh Buck, Josh Orr, just putting themselves out there. And what happened was we just really became great friends. And what happened on Saturday, like I wake up, I turn on the Zoom, I say, hey, come on in, guys. And one person I forgot to mention was Bruce. He was our Tiger consigliere over the weekend, and he is such a great guy. Not only helped us out throughout the build, but references, was really able to share a lot of historical stuff around the vehicle. And it was just an overall great time. And Bruce was on every day too. So he's a super MVP. And I remember on Saturday, I'm like, okay, hey guys, the live's up. I'm going to step away. I actually met Jon and Brian Krieger for lunch at a barbecue joint. We had Colpar, came home, jumped right back in. Same with Sunday and Monday. It's like toss it up in the morning. People come in and out, very casual. And I think that's maybe something we'll do in the future where if the group of us can pick a day and just, again, throw up a Zoom, the listeners pop in and out whenever you want, say hi, and it's just building models. That was it.
Yeah, like I wasn't feeling sad enough that I had to be up at 4 a.m. for work on Sunday. I get a video call from JB at Colpar Hobbies. That made me feel just amazing.
Jon and Brian and I wanted to say hi. We were there. We're like, who would enjoy this? Ivan, because he was here. He's been right here. We're standing in the footsteps of a great man. So we'll definitely need to do it again. And what was fun about that build too, we did out of the box, and then some people took it to the next level. Jackson being one of them, 3D printing parts, literally designing parts, sending files to people, printing them that night. Bruce did the same. So thank you to both of you, gentlemen. Wow. It just shows, I think, the strength and sense of community that the Posse has. And we're, again, very thankful, and we look forward to doing it again. And I think there's a lot of merit and a lot of positive things that came out of it, and something, like I said, we'll definitely do again. And then maybe Ivan, on your side of the world, host a European hang sesh so the times are more conducive to people.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because it's amazing how many people in the UK and Europe and going towards this side of the planet support us. So it'd be a shame to have them miss out. So yeah, definitely look at hosting some normal timed hangouts.
Yeah, and 2 more people I got to throw out that jumped in. Brian Krieger, special shout out to him. He gave us a history on Mac lesson one night, which was absolutely awesome. I think we could have recorded that and packaged it and sold it because it was so great, and he was going through his archives of photos. So I certainly learned a lot, and maybe that's what we should do, is have him back on. And then another person, we had the Sam Dwyer on from the book.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah. He was there. He was there working on his Samoa.
Oh, so, he's probably finished.
Yeah, it's probably done.
Hashtag mini group build.
Samoa over the rainbow.
Samoa 6.
Somewhere I belong. For those that don't know, we're doing a mini group amongst ourselves of just a Samoa, a friendly banter. It's me, Ivan, Grant, TJ, Sam Dwyer, the Sam Dwyer, my apologies. The Sam Dwyer, and Doc Jonathan Anderson. So look out on our socials for that too. Just jovial. If you want to build along, go for it. No pressure. Super fun. And I will probably take mine to Telford to meet Ivan.
Ooh.
Every time you say the Sam Dwyer, I can hear his response to you.
Yeah.
Just can't say it out loud.
Yeah.
This is a
Keep
G
it clean.
show.
Keep it clean.
Jackson will gladly say it.
He doesn't care.
Oh man, enough of me. I'll kick it over to TJ.
All right, so with that, we'll do a brief rundown of what's happening over in the Mach-E group build group on Facebook. As of today, which is September 9th, we have 174 members, and there's a lot of awesome work going on. A lot of people are getting stuff built. A lot of people are still collecting their kits, which is cool. One guy, Joel Munson, one of our Patreon supporters, he just posted hours ago. He's trying to decide between the raccoon and the Krakenvogel. And so hopefully he goes with the Krakenvogel, because no one's built one of those. I have one. I love that thing. I know John's not a big fan of that. The new spotter design, which the Krakenvogel is based off of, it's a new spotter with 6 rocket launchers instead of little spindly arms. They're really cool. I have one. I really want to build it because they're neat. Yeah, it's been pretty cool. My cat is meowing. I don't know if you can hear that. He's making another a guest star
Cameo.
behind the door, chirping and meowing as he wants in here. But yeah, it's going really well. I finished my first build for the group build. I think maybe the last time we recorded, I don't remember, is the leopard. It's really cool. So yeah, check it out. Come join. Build some Mac.
Yeah, I've decided with that build, I'm not starting a new one until I book my flights. So when that is, I don't know. That's my challenge to myself.
They're so easy to build. You might as well just build one now, then build another one. I know you have a couple.
Yeah, a few.
I'm going to kick it back over to John.
All right, so back to me, as if I didn't talk enough already. So this is the Vegas show we're going to briefly discuss. It was an absolute blast. Talking about staying up till 3 a.m. Well, I got up at 3 a.m. to go to the airport, and it was literally I think I was out from my house for about 30 hours. So left at 3 a.m, returned at noon on the next day. So it was a blast. Flew into Vegas. Scott and his buddy from Utah, who I knew in Cleveland, Ohio, John Vitkus, picked me up from the airport at 7 a.m. We went to breakfast, and then we went over to the Orleans Hotel, which was an absolute stellar show. I think they had a little over 800 models there, and had the opportunity to hang out with another co-host of mine, Grant, who made the trek from the opposite direction. And he came over with his buddy, and it was just a blast. I think the highlight of that show, again, is the people, the models, the vendors circled the hall. It was really an incredible an event. And the IPMS Las Vegas folks have a lot to be proud of. Incredible raffle. I mean, some of the best work I've seen in a long time. Grant, the thing that sticks out to me again were those like goblins or whatever they were, the orange things. The paint work on that, world class, World Expo class.
Yeah, that was Golden Demon class. That was Warhammer Extra. I think it actually was in Golden Demon. I've been looking at it. I don't know. It's a goblin or orc thing, and it's just beautiful. It was just beautiful paint. There's some pictures posted on both of our sites that went out, so it's just fantastic.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll mention at that show, some of you may be seen, but we're starting to hand out community coins. So we have plastic Posse coins. There was a soft launch at the IPMS Nationals, and we gave out a few, and we're starting to ramp up to send them out to our supporters and special guests and people that really embody the spirit of the Posse, but more importantly, the hobby. And we found some really good folks in Vegas that we felt that they deserved a coin. And, one of them is Bruce, who is a close friend of the podcast now, really got to know Ivan at the IPMS Nationals, and just a super, super nice gentleman. Everyone sees him post online. He goes by Bruce Hazami, I believe, and former Hollywood scale model maker. Now he's retired. He has these incredible work in progress folders. I'm talking like hundreds of photographs down to the minutia of his dioramas, of his builds. He catalogs them all. He talks about the hours worked. And then he's just a super nice gentleman in person. And again, it was super nice to meet him again. He loves Ivan. I wish Ivan was there to share in the joy. And we took a selfie to send to you, Ivan.
It brought a tear to my eye.
He was also a Revell artist in the 70s.
That's right.
On box art. And I actually got one of his kits there from one of the vendors that had him autograph it for me. That was fantastic. I mean, he did some great work.
Yeah. And a few other people we saw, Angel from Micro World Games, Steve Munsell, he was there. with the value gear stuff, which was great. He made the trip up from Arizona. So again, another great West event. Vegas boys have a lot to be proud of, a lot of fun. And then the evening as well, hanging out with Hank and his family, other members of the posse there, had a nice dinner. And again, I think we rubbed it into you, Ivan. Did we send you all dessert photos at
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Not sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, not sorry. Hashtag loser.
Loser.
So I understand that they had a lot more entries than they expected.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes, I think they were probably, I'm guessing, expecting around 500, but they had over 800, I think. I know it was very close to that. And, the show organizers, God bless them, the line was long, but again, you're there with friends. They know what they need to improve on and they'll get there. And one of the things that I thought that was great too about the show is they started to pass out feedback forms. Now, I think that's great. With that comes, a manpower requirement, a resource requirement to support it. But I think it was a great step to show that, some clubs are progressive and they're trying things out. And that was really great. I actually took a photo of it, looked pretty simple. I did not judge. I actually went to lunch with a few folks. Grant, we went and caught up. So, but next time, certainly I'll step up to judge because I think they'll need it based on the amount of the attendance there. And then at the end, somebody was fire sailing dragon kits and I got a L70 and a 234-4 for $20 a piece, which is practically free. And that's where Ivan shed another tear. So, yeah.
I'd like to bring up a couple things too, John, about the show, which was great. I mean, first of all, what I liked about Joe and the group there is they brought in every group in the Las Vegas area. So they had a Gundam group, the car groups,
amps.
Figure group, amps, and each group judged their own category basically. So Gundam guys judged their Gundams, amps judged armor, car guys judged car, and it was a fantastic way they ran that and way they're bringing in every group were in their area for their show. And another really cool thing about it is all these organizations were putting coins or ribbons or things down for what models they like the best. So you would walk around and you'd see a coin from amps, which is actually really cool. I've got one somewhere, but it's a poker chip. Yeah, there it is right there. Yeah, you can't see that. Of course, we're a podcast, but it's a poker chip and it's really cool. It's got the amp emblem on it and everything. Now the car group guys had some things, the figure guys, and it was just a fantastic way they brought everything together. And my hat is off to those guys. They had a great organization, and this show was really, really fun, and it was really a good time. I know Scott and JB and I had a great time meeting some great people. We met some Patreon people that were brand new to the group. I probably butchered your name tonight, but we had a great time, and it was so much fun to see the interactions and the other groups were talking to each other, which was nice. It was really a good environment.
Yeah, hands down, all around a great show. And speaking of other shows, I'll be heading over to Salt Lake to see Doug and Scott and a few other people. Steve Baker's going to make the drive with me and potentially Brian Krieger as well. And we'll be over in the Salt Lake region for that IPMS show on the 24th. I'll be arriving in the afternoon of the 22nd, and we have a full deck planned for some car restorations, Hill Air Force Base, and a few other sites. So, and again, another great trip. I can't wait. And Ivan, just fly over and just stay. Just hop on a plane, man. We'll make it work.
Just do it.
Just do it. I mean, it's
things
fine.
don't cost money. Just do it.
Just do it. I can live in my basement. It's fine. You're claiming asylum. Your territory is, yeah.
I've already been applying for jobs over there. Don't get me started.
Speaking of over there, Ivan, tell us about the big event over there.
The big event, the big one, the Nationals. In 64 days, we have Telford Scale Model World, the big one in the UK. This is our biggest show. Unfortunately, we've not had many updates. Usually, we start to see them around early August. We start getting updates around timetables, prices, competition categories, entry forms, traders, floor plans, things like that. Now, I know there's a lot going on behind the scenes. The Nats takes a lot of planning and a lot of scheduling. There's a lot going on. Unfortunately, there's been a delay in getting stuff out this year. The trader list for 2022 has been released, but it is not a set in stone list yet. It is a fantastic list of traders. Many of them are EU traders, but they have confirmed they won't actually be in attendance. So that list, like I said, is very fluid at the minute. But we are back at full capacity. We will be having all three halls back open again. We do have overseas IPMS attending. So this is all really good news. It's really positive. It shows that the show should be back to what it was 2019 levels, possibly, which would be incredible. And I'm just really looking forward to it again.
Can't wait. I've been trying to. I'm gonna take Scott. I'm gonna drive over to Utah and just throw him in the car.
Him.
Just grab him.
just grab him and don't let go.
You're coming. So no, I can't wait. It's gonna be awesome.
It's one of those shows that many say should be a day longer. There's a lot to cram in that 1.5 days. You might as well call it half day. It's only 6 hours on the Sunday. There'll be the remembrance moment at 11 o'clock on the Sunday where they bring the brass band in. It goes quiet. It's a very nice moment, but it's a show that I feel should be maybe a day longer because there's an awful lot going on. But yeah, we got that on in 64 days from recording, 11th till the 13th of November, if I remember correctly.
Can't wait. Can't stop, won't stop with shows.
It's going to be, yeah, like you said, just if you can get to a show, get to it. Just get there.
Sweet.
All right, you guys ready for some social media shout outs?
Let's do this.
Cool. I was looking online for dioramas because I'm looking for diorama ideas, base ideas for armor because I'm now an armor builder apparently. And I found this guy. It's JH Modelator on Instagram. He does dioramas. He has this really cool one. He did a Viking ship cresting a wave in a storm, and it's gorgeous. It's really, really cool what he was able to do. And he also did a really cool the Razor Crest for Mandalorian being lifted out of the water. I assume from episode 3 of season 2 of Mando. He doesn't have the AT-AT crane on it. It's just the Razor Crest itself coming out of the water. Very, very cool. Whole bunch of other stuff. I highly recommend checking him out. There's another one. I'm not sure if this is up most people's alley, but I really kind of had a good time watching it. It's Tom's Modeling in Motion. He's got YouTube videos, sets of music, and it was like watching Gumby and Pokey as a kid. Claymation, except he's putting models together, and it's like you see them kind of flow together. All kinds of different things. He does wooden ships. He's got plastic models. He has a great Zukimura F4 build that he does. And it was really, really fun to watch. Seriously, if you and they're short. If you're interested, give it a look. I don't know if it's up everybody's alley, but it's certainly was fun for me. But give those guys a look. And with that, I'm going to flow right into our feedback for this episode. I'll start with Ben Hardaway. He congratulated us on 52 episodes. He enjoys our tips and interviews with some of the best modelers in the world. He says, I hope you won't hold this against me, but like TJ, I'm a proud member of the Northern Virginia modeling community. IPMS Nova member since 2014. I focus primarily on 1/35th scale armor and 1/350th scale aircraft carriers and the amazing 1/72nd and 1/144 scale Star Wars kits from Bandai. I always listen to your podcast while at the bench. And over time, the quality of my builds has improved as I've incorporated the techniques and ideas from your podcast into my work. He appreciates our positive approach. He does recommend that we broaden our reach just a little to bring in some of the excellent shipbuilders that are out there. He wants to know where the shipwrights are.
So we got a nice note from our good friend Andy Taylor, and he said, Triple P, I thought you all were honorable gentlemen until I realized you were part of the problem. As we are well aware, the San Marcos hotel blocks opened last Saturday at midnight Central Time, and a new record for the host hotel selling out was established. While I was ready to go early and did everything described by the incredibly organized Nats team, I alas did not get a room in the venue. My plan was to book the next closest hotel, which was accomplished easily. I was not ready for the backlash on Facebook about the apparent lack of planning for the hotel, which I might add is not true. The unfair circumstances, etc. Negativity was not surprising, but nonetheless disappointing. I agree. To come to the point, the most memorable Facebook post was a gentleman who said, quote, so long as the podcast and social media folks are running the Nats hype train, this is going to be a recurring theme. I'm honored to call myself a member of the Triple P as you are a force of positive change. Our hobby is strong and getting stronger, largely due to the new camaraderie that your podcast and others, as was evidenced during the podcast seminar at the Omaha Nats, has created a new positive modeling energy and drawing even larger crowds. Well done, Posse, well done. When modelers are up late at night, booking rooms a year out, you know you're doing it right.
Yes, we all had multiple alarms set in a very coordinated effort to attack the Embassy Suite site all at once.
Yep.
Moving on, we're going to go over to Boyd Brown. Every time I listen to the podcast, I say to myself, gee, I need to send these guys a message. But like that last 5%, I have fallen short on that goal until now. I can't tell you guys how much I enjoy the podcast. Listen to you guys while I drive to work. The podcast gets me there to and from 2 days in a row. just gets my day going right. I often chime in on the conversation. Yes, I talk to myself, but really I'm talking as if you are all in the car with me. He goes on to talk about how much he too likes our positivity, even when we talk about things that set people off sometimes. He's looking forward to hanging in San Marcos. Boyd, so are we. It's going to be an awesome time. Really appreciate your comments. I talk to myself with other podcasts as well. Nothing out of the usual. So thank you, good sir.
All right, this one is from Peter Ferrugio. Hey guys, just want to say how much I enjoyed your interview with John Murphy. I've only recently found out about John's work and became friends on Facebook. After discussing his Centurion Mark V, he contacted me personally to talk about techniques. Keep up the great work on the podcast and great interviews. Yeah, John is a fantastic guy. You just need to call him Spud now, but he's a fantastic guy. Now it's time for the new PPP interview. This time, JB and Scott are talking to Jon Bryon. Enjoy.
All right, welcome into another Plastic Posse podcast interview. Today, we are excited to have a gentleman on who's been a big fan of the show. He sent us some great feedback, which we'll discuss a little bit in detail. He's an incredible aircraft modeler from the UK. Jon Bryon, welcome to the Posse.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, John. Really happy to talk to you, and certainly looking forward to diving in some of the builds that you've displayed on your blog.
Well, John has been terrific in sending us some really great suggestions and feedback along the way. And I'm going to start out with kind of taking John to the woodshed a little bit, all in fun, of course. But John sent him some great feedback, which sponsored a lot of subsequent feedback throughout the months and a lot of feedback from other listeners as well. And if any of you listen to the show regularly, you'll recall this, but John had sent in a bit of feedback, which I'll summarize, and then John, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this. Essentially, it was a little bit of a frustration that the aircraft modeling community didn't really have as much collaboration as the armor modeling community, kind of those night shift kind of people to kind of bring people in and share techniques as readily as the armor modeling community seems to. So, I mean, John, is that kind of the intent of your feedback originally?
Yeah, that's a fair summary. I think a lot of it came from the fact that if you look, I'm not an armor modeler. I only make aircraft, but I admire armor modeling from a distance. I watch Uncle Night Shift's videos every week, and there are certain names that come up in the armor community, as far as I can tell. People like him, Adam Wilder, Mig Jimenez, and so forth. And I think John Bonani I would put in there as well. He's someone who comes up amongst that crowd. And there are others as well whose names don't come to the top of my head right now. But everyone seems to agree that they are fantastic modelers. There's a lot of positivity around their work. They themselves are very open with what they're doing, and they seem to have some sort of relationship with one another, which certainly on the face of it looks to be a very positive and at least semi-collaborative. And I just look at the aircraft modeling world and don't see the same dynamics playing out. And I'm afraid I don't have any answers as to why that is. But it's, I think, an accurate observation. And so it interests me as to why the cultures are different.
Yeah, I think, we've, as I mentioned, we've certainly had a lot of discussion around this point, but I think I almost wonder how much of it, and JB, I'd be interested in your take on this as well. I wonder how much of that starts with like a Martin. In the aircraft world, is there that not just incredible modeler, but a guy with a lot of personality and a very, very broad appeal like Martin is in armor?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of some in the aircraft community. Maybe, Spencer Pollard is one example. I think he's a great, ambassador to the aircraft world, and maybe, probably one of the most prolific modelers on that side. I don't know. I've thought about this a lot, and maybe it's just, maybe the armor guys put themselves out more. Maybe they're just more open. I don't know. But, you look at people like Mike Rinaldi doing live streams, interacting with the community. You look at Night Shift with YouTube, interacting with that community, his Patreon, always open, always willing to talk. And, I've even messaged Adam is another great example. You shoot him a message, and I'll be honest, you can be a nobody and he'll respond to you. I've shot him a message out of the blue the first time a couple years ago, and he was kind enough to respond. And he's like that with everyone. I don't know, Scott. It's just a an interesting dynamic. Certainly I know a lot of great aircraft modelers, countless here in the States and abroad. That are awesome. But, I don't know if maybe it just comes down to them putting themselves out there and, opening themselves up to engagement.
It seems to me, because I'm certainly not going to disagree that there are great aircraft modelers out there and that they're generating very public content. But it does seem to me that you don't have to stray very far before you'll find someone who quite vocally disagrees with that person or doesn't have the same opinion of their work as other people might do. And I might call that a form of tribalism almost, that the aircraft modeling world can be fairly tribal or fragmented. Again, I'm looking at armor modeling from a distance, and I'm not saying it's all entirely happy. I'm sure there are disagreements over there too. But it does seem that there is quite a lot of mutual admiration and respect amongst those people. And when you listen to interviews, because a lot of them give excellent interviews, they often seem to go back to this missing links thing, which I think is connected with hyperscale or in some way in the past. And again, it's not a scene which I was a part of or participated in, but that seems to be a common route for a lot of these guys who have now become armor modeling superstars. And I don't think anything like that exists as far as I'm aware in aircraft modeling. I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time online. So I think that's a key difference, and it seems to be bearing fruit now.
You bring up a good point, and I think part of it, you can actually, yes, a good point is bringing it back to missing links. And I think what was important there, back at the early beginning, on hyperscale, I don't believe it was the case. On missing links, you had to use a real name. There's a personality attached to a real name as opposed to, monikers over on hyperscale. And I think that was maybe something that helped a lot to draw that personal connection because you have that person's name. A lot of times, there was a lot of personal messages too. And I was a part of that community, but only as an observer. I rarely ever posted, but, there was a time when you could go onto this simple website and see, Adam, Mike, and Mig's work all in the same day, posting whip pics and, finished work and interacting with other people. And it's really interesting. You point out that site is kind of like the epicenter of, where armor kind of originated from and grew from.
That it's kind of like the headwaters of this community of collaboration. And I think maybe one thing, as you guys are discussing this, that I'm thinking of is the integration of the Spanish modelers and the little bit more, I don't want to debate this here, but that little bit more artistic interpretation of weathering. Armor pieces in general, I'm stereotyping, tend to be more weathered than aircraft models do on an overall scale. And I'm wondering, like, the timing of that forum, that obviously predates Facebook and everything. And John said you could get on there and you could interact with Adam and Mike and Mig and these guys that have been so influential as armor modelers. I'm wondering how much timing plays into that.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation because, again, pre-Facebook, pre-missing links, you had, in terms of aircraft modeling, a limited number of websites where people were gathering around these things, but there already were differences between them. So, late 90s, you'd have Aircraft Resource Center, you'd have Modeling Madness, and you'd have Hyperscale. For me, they were the three big ones. There were a couple of others as well. And already the forums which grew up around those or associated with them were pretty tribal, to be honest. And some of those go back to a news group, Rec Model Scale. I don't know if either of you guys were ever involved in that. I think I joined that in about 96. That was a highly fractious place. I mean, that was just endless arguments over nothing. And aircraft modeling did seem to predominate, is my memory, in that particular group. And I don't recall that much about armor on there or other genres. And so I wonder if early on there were strong disagreements, strong personalities, and they sort of just have filtered through to now, really. I mean, even if you go back to, Brett Green's an interesting example because Brett Green, I've never heard anyone say anything negative about Brett Green publicly.
Oh,
He's just an amazing gentleman, and he's always been very, very kind to me. And in 2007, he started publishing my models on Hyperscale. Everyone has good things to say about Brett Green. But nevertheless, hyperscale forums could still be pretty fractious place for the aircraft modeling community. And you had controversies over things like the Jackal Squadron. I can't even remember when that was, maybe the late 90s, early noughties, something like that.
And the fatal flaw as well.
Say again?
The fatal flaw. I remember that being just the key word for kits.
And then there's the whole weathering thing as well. And I guess one difference is, again, maybe a misperception, but amongst armor modeling, people may disagree. People who I I think I have a high opinion of may disagree about modelling styles, but nevertheless can respect the artistic endeavour behind it, the execution of those techniques and so forth. Whereas in aircraft modelling, it often becomes a lot more personal for some reason. You're just wrong. I'm conscious that I know it does exist in armour. I think, Jon, you had some issues with some modulation or something recently. I don't really follow these things, but I'm not saying no one has opinions on that side. But again, it just comes back to mutual respect. And I think something else is a lot of the armour modelling guys who I hear, like Mike Rinaldi, Adam Wilder, and Uncle Night Shift and so forth, they come across as quite humble, actually. I think there's quite a lot of humility in the way that they present themselves and communicate. This is a very broad approach, but I'm not sure that that's so apparent sometimes on the aircraft side.
I would agree with that. I think personality plays into it. I think if we were to be honest, and we constantly talk about Martin. He's a friend of ours, and he's so influential. But I think if you look at his secret sauce, I've got air quotes here, I think so much of what makes him watchable, it isn't just his amazing modeling skills or his great photography and video editing. It's his personality. It's his self-deprecation. It's his tight editing style. A night shift video isn't 90 minutes or 100 minutes. It's usually 20 or 25 minutes. And he's got the ability to tell a story in a way that's fun and engaging. And so I definitely think that's part of it. Well, Jon, you're such a terrific aircraft modeler, and we're going to talk about some of your builds here, but maybe let me ask you a question as we kind of start to wrap this up. Is part of maybe this tribalism and approach and everything, you think it boils down to the type of modeling? I mean, they're all plastic kits and yada, yada, yada. But what I mean is with armor modelers, I think, and I guess I'm generalizing again, but I think so much of armor modeling is put the kit together and you've got a canvas to do your paint and your art on. So it's the finishing, it's the weathering and the mud and the splatter and everything else like that. Where with aircraft, I seem to see, my perception only, but a more of a attention to detail. This panel had 16 rivets and not 12 rivets. And this exhaust manifold was only through the, revision G2 model. This rudder was on later models only, those kinds of things. So do you think that might be a factor as well?
I think it could be a factor. I don't know enough about armor modeling to really comment on how people approach that. I think it's quite interesting seeing some of the recent commentary on judging, for example, amongst aircraft modelers, and seeing some of the stuff which is coming out of IPMS in the USA and the comments there in relation to things like alignment and stuff like that. And it really is a very forensic, hypercritical way of looking at models. And I confess, I fall into that too. When I go around Telford and I'm looking at models, I'm really there to be impressed in terms of, are the seams removed? Is it not clean in terms of weather, but is it cleanly built? The joints, are they good? I'm not that keen on alignment, but does it look at least square and so forth? So there's a lot of attention focused on that. And much less of let's put it together and then focus on the finish of it. But of course, the finish matters as well. And I do wonder why sometimes aircraft modelers seem to take it really personally. If an aircraft model isn't finished in the style which they agree with, people seem to take it quite personally. And that's where things like no crew chief ever, that strapline which comes up, I think, on SMCG, that sort of thing comes from. I mean, that sort of judgmentalism in terms of how aircraft models are finished. Whereas in armor, I see people, really care about execution. They care that it's done very, very well, but there seems to be a bit more freedom to try new things. And Night Shift does a lot of that, right? He's quite free with saying, this is an experiment. I'm not sure how this is going to turn out. And also working on tanks which might not even have had production runs, or they may be, I don't really understand this well, but come from a game sort of environment rather than from the real world. And there's a lot more respect and credibility given to that, say, compared to aircraft for some reason. I don't know why that is. I think part of it might be, and this is slightly controversial, but because I discussed it once with someone else and they thought I was completely wrong. But I think in terms of aspiration, I think a lot more of us grow up wanting to be pilots than we do tank commanders in a way. There's something very aspirational about that. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was growing up. I tried to join the RAF and so forth. And so I think there are a lot more frustrated dreams, to be honest, amongst people that are into aircraft. That's the life that I wanted or to participate in, and scale modeling, like in my case, is probably the closest that I'm going to get to it. And so there's some sort of personal investiture. Whereas I see people, especially newcomers into the hobby, maybe get into armor modeling much more than into aircraft. There's less personal investment in it. It's more for the sake of the modeling and the art than necessarily for the subject itself. Again, we're generalizing, and these could be wrong, but there is something which I do wonder if it plays into it sometimes.
Well, it's certainly a fascinating discussion, and you have guys like yourself and, Spencer, and, over in North America, you've got Chris Sieber, Luftram, who's just terrific, and Chris Wallace, model airplane maker. I mean, there are certainly some really friendly, engaging, great guys that build aircraft modelers. Maybe, maybe the tide will change, the environment will change. We certainly here at the Posse, as we were talking about before, really want to encourage that kind of community and positive environment. Because, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're building a Warhammer figure or a Gundam or a tank or a little figure of someone riding on a bicycle. We all kind of do the same thing, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you might want to edit this out later on, but I am going to say that I think the Plastic Posse podcast, one of the reasons I really like you guys is you are trying to be a bridge between a lot of these different tribes, to be honest. And you have people on your podcast who will quite violently disagree with each other, even semi-publicly online and so forth. And that's quite an achievement to maintain that sort of credibility where people are willing to come and have the conversation with you, whereas they may not be willing to have it with one another. And so you perform a very good bridge function, and I think you're doing that very, very well.
Well, that's very kind. We really
I suppose what I will
it.
say is there are lots of great aircraft modelers out there who have great personalities and are very humble. I'm certainly not quibbling about that. And some people who I would think are fantastic, like John Chung, at the moment, the shuttle guy. And it's strange to me because lots of people, that's how he's come to their attention as the shuttle guy. John Chung has been around for a long time. I mean, and he's been putting stuff on hyperscale since at least the mid-noughties of a level which no one else is at in terms of the forensic analysis that he has of the shape of the aircraft and the attention he's paying to the finish. And his stuff was mind-blowing back there. And he was doing things back then which people consider new and innovative now. It's great to see him really flourishing on social media with some of that work. Other people who I have heard on some podcasts, people like Fanch Lubin over in France. Again, I've never really interacted with him, but he sounds like a wonderful, humble guy, and he's sharing his stuff, and his modeling is just otherworldly in terms of what he's doing with his products. Tony Bell is someone else who I really admire his work. Very understated in the way he presents himself, but top quality. So, yeah, I definitely don't consider myself a terrific aircraft modeler at all, as you said earlier. I think that's unnecessarily high praise. I would like to think of myself as what anybody could achieve through very by the numbers. This is just recipe building and painting. There's nothing special about what I'm doing. Anybody could do this. Whereas some of those other guys I've mentioned, they're on a different level in terms of vision and technical ability.
We see a lot of that, and it's great that we're humble, but I think sometimes we're our own worst critics too. So
that's definitely true.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's kind of move on. That was a lot of fun. John, tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you first get into scale modeling and kind of discover you had a passion for the hobby?
So, I'm 43, so that places me on the map now. I live just on the southern edge of Greater London, the boundary between London and the countryside. 2 miles directly from Biggin Hill's runway, which leaves me in the slightly odd position now when a Spitfire flying overhead is not even worth looking up at it. It's such a common occurrence out of there. So,
that's blasphemy right there.
I know. It's terrible, isn't it? It's terrible. So I've been here about 8 years. Yeah, I'm married and to my lovely wife, Abby, got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old daughter. So I do have a family. And 43, and I started modeling. I don't know. On my website, I think I said I was 5. I might have been 6. I can't remember. All I remember is that my mother came home one day from a jumble sale. I don't know if you have them. They've been replaced by charity shops here. It's now where people used to take all their secondhand stuff and sell it. And we didn't have a lot of money. And my mum would go to these jumble sales, buy clothes and whatnot. And one day she came home with, I think it was an Airfix kit. It was certainly a 172nd, and it was either a Hurricane or a Spitfire. And I put it together. My dad was a craftsman, could do anything with his hands. He was a technology teacher in a school, and so he was very for it. And I remember earth brown Humbrol enamel paint, slapping it all over. And for some reason, I built that thing, and that was just it. And I have never stopped since. usually I say, oh yeah, when I got to my teenage years, I found cars and I found girls and all these sort of things. Well, in the UK, finding cars isn't a big thing. Certainly found girls, but most people are lying when they say how much of a distraction they are. I've been to model shows and I've seen what modelers look like. And in my opinion, I was definitely interested in girls, but I can't say that they were that interested in me. And so I never had an excuse to give up modeling and carried on all the way through. So a couple of big milestones, I suppose, because I built everything and anything when I was a kid. And I remember it was summer of 92. I think I was 14, got on my bike. I had a load of money that I'd earned from my paper rounds, and I went on it was about a 30-mile bike ride. And it was amazing back then. You could go to Toys R Us in Woking, which is near where I grew up. And they had Hasegawa kits, just shelves of Hasegawa kits there. I was loaded up on all these Hasegawa kits, went to another model shop in Guildford, which is another town, discovered Mr. Hobby Aqueous Colour, just this incredible paint that you could get. Got an airbrush the same year. And so I was away then with, these are better than Matchbox kits. These are better than Airfix kits. This Hasegawa business. I mean, back then, of course, you had no websites or anything. I didn't even know that magazines existed, and I certainly didn't know that clubs existed. It was just me figuring out everything on my own. And you open up a 1/72 Hasegawa F14 and find there's this sheet of thin metal, and I've got no idea what this is. That was my first experience of photo etch. I think it was steel. It was really horrible stuff to use, probably joining it to plastic with plastic cement. So yeah, my early discoveries back then. But I think, just to take an aside, there's just one enormous difference between what was going on back then and what's going on now is you just had no access to how to do anything. You have to do it all yourself, and that's very, very slow. Nowadays, you can find out things incredibly quickly. So yeah, got into airbrushing around the same time. And then the next big leap for me was in 1994. I had discovered a magazine called Scale Models International. And one of the contributors to that was a chap called Jonathan Mott. And he had an article in there on the 1/48 scale Airfix Buccaneer. And I'd never really been into 1/48 scale aircraft until that point. And that's a horrible kit. The Airfix Buccaneer is a kit with a reputation. I built 2 of them. It's a horrendous kit to put together, but I was really captivated by what he'd done with it. And he'd started some weathering. He did that, and he did also an Airfix Jaguar. And this is the first time I think I'd really seen people attempt to weather aircraft. These are in Gulf War pink schemes, which obviously chipped back to the underlying green and grey. And he'd had a go at doing some of that. And so I had a go at doing some of that as well. And I was thinking about that recently because people often talk about weathering being a relatively new phenomenon. And in some ways it is, but sometimes I think that's to do with time as well. Back then, the early 90s, the Gulf War I had just happened. And the US Navy was moving from gloss grey and white to the TPS scheme. And these things weathered a lot more. And all of a sudden there was a lot more imagery around and of aircraft which were weathered, whereas older aircraft seemed a little bit less so, at least on the photographs that people had access to. So that's where I think there was sort of an explosion in interest in weathering. But I got that kit, and that started a collection 27 years ago, which has now continued to today, where I have only ever built 1/48 scale military aircraft that have seen service since World War II. So that's my lane. I have absolutely no interest in deviating from it whatsoever. And that started a collection which, is now filling up my living room. My very understanding wife allows currently 92 aircraft to populate the shelves in the living room.
That's incredible. She is very 92.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, for someone, she really doesn't like ornaments. She prefers a very Spartan look. But when she married me, she knew what she was getting into. So
early on, you mentioned that you were just kind of figuring out this, all on your own, and so many modelers. You had a little bit of a solitary experience. When did you first find some local collaboration or online collaboration, and how did that affect how you did your hobby?
Yeah. So I went to university in 96 when I was 18, and I was fortunate enough to go to Cambridge. And the advantage of going to Cambridge was back then everyone was just getting into dial-up and modems and so forth. And the internet was a bit of a new thing here. But that university had local area networks hardwired into every single student room. So in 97, I got my own computer as opposed to a family one, and just plugged it into the wall. And I wasn't having to worry about modems and dial-up speeds and stuff like that. The download speeds were incredible. And then you just got plugged into the nascent world of modeling online, which, as I said earlier, was like rec model scale. And I'm sure there were some other things around that have slipped my mind in early forums. And of course, there weren't very many photographs around in those days either. But that was my first exposure, I think, to a wider modeling world. More of an observer than maybe a participant dabbling here and there. That's always tended to be my style anyway. And then, of course, the big ones came along, like Hyperscale, as we said, and Aircraft Resource Centre and so forth, and just began to open my eyes to what was out there in the world, what people were doing technique-wise, but still, to be honest, very slow. I mean, information was still compared to what happens now on Facebook. And people are still very set in their ways in terms of techniques and materials. And so I think a lot of the developments, again, I've written about this on my blog, so I think the changes in the materials that we're using have had big effects on what we can do in the hobby. And I think that's much more recent, probably the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And like you said, it's an overload today. I think you could probably gain as much information as literally in 5 minutes as a day of hyperscale, even 10 years ago. And it was such a pain. We've talked about it before, where the engagement was difficult because of the ability to upload photographs. You got to find a host site, then you got to copy the link over. And it just really, it was the start of something great, but it really shows why social media has become that place, because of convenience and accessibility and, also just the, usability of it as well. You could be building something, take a snap of it, throw it online, and, literally an hour later have 100 likes on it and engagement, and create such a different experience than you would, 10 years ago on hyperscale. But hyperscale is still an excellent resource. What I think, and you've probably realized this, is, Facebook is good for sharing your work, I think, and engaging the community. But when it comes to deep technical kind of discussion and those serious conversations, if you can have them with the hobby, the hyperscale serves that purpose still. And same with missing links. I think that's one thing that is missing from social media, is the credibility of some of the groups. And hyperscale is still that place. If I have a technical question, I got to go there.
It's really interesting you raised the issue of credibility, and I think it's related to an issue of authority, like who are the authority figures, as it were, in modelling? Who do you look to say, they know what they're talking about? Because I think back then, the lack of photographs meant that someone would come online and say, you need to do this, that, and the other. This is how you do this, that, and the other. And you had no way of evaluating whether what they were telling you was any good or not, or if they were any good at executing it. I agree, there are different types of models. I think most of us are our own worst critics. Some people don't necessarily have the eye that other people might have. So you might get someone say, I sprayed on a gloss layer, let's say Future to be controversial, or Johnson's Clear if you're from my country, and I got a glass-like finish. But you didn't know whether that finish was glass-like or not until photographs came along. And then photographs come along, and all of a sudden you can start comparing what people are saying with what they're doing. And that was a fantastic thing, because that then gave you a really good steer as these people are the people who I need to listen to if I want to improve on this technique and so forth. On the flip side, like what you said in terms of the technical stuff, by that I would mean things like accuracy or the technical specifications of the subject. Yeah. For me, I still daily visit the forums. I am daily on Brit Modeler, on ARC. I still visit Plain Talking every day, because there you will find people who really know what they're talking about in terms of the subject, and the material is easy to access. Facebook definitely has that, but it's just hard to access and share it. That's where you go and ask questions. And you can, I built a Spitfire PR19 in December, and on Brit Modeler, there are incredible resources on there if you are interested in accuracy issues, which you won't find anywhere else.
100% agree. With exception to a few and I'm talking from an armor perspective on Facebook, there's a few groups I know to go to for really deep technical questions. But even sometimes missing links is still that place where, the guys that literally wrote the book on it still visit, and hyperscale is that place too. Like you mentioned, you could post something up on a 109 and have an answer probably within a day, to maybe Jerry Crandall himself even contributing, for that matter. But, that's the one thing where it's hard to find on social media. But, when it comes to the hobby itself and actually building models, I think it is a really great place.
Yeah. And obviously, so Google, I think, was just a transformative thing. I can't remember what even old search engines were called. Alta Vista, maybe, stuff like this.
I remember using Yahoo, Metacrawler.
All these sort of things. And all of a sudden, Google comes along, and now you can do your own research and compare that with what other people are doing, and then share it. So, for example, I was building a Grumman duck in the autumn, and I've got the Steve Ginter book on it. I've got the Squadron book on it, and they're just not in-depth enough in some of the differences in the variants which I was making. And then you can start Googling, and you've got images, and you can go in-depth on your own. And then you're not on a par with the published sources, but you can interrogate them much better, and you can do a lot of your own research and come to your own conclusions and share that in a different way. And Google was absolutely transformative for that.
Yeah, and it's really crazy the amount of information that's being disseminated as well. I feel like every week we see a new photograph that proves some sort of, historical anecdote wrong, whether it be, gray barrels on a tank or, the undercarriage color of a certain aircraft. I mean, it is unbelievable, the access of information. Like you said, simple Google searches. And if you're savvy with Google too, you know tricks to try to find information that, isn't necessarily classified, but we'll just say as a Spitfire Mark 9 or something. You search for adjacent things and kind of lead into it. But, it's really unbelievable with that amount of knowledge and reference material and how it supports the hobby. And it's the golden age in every aspect, I think. And it's a lot of fun. And then I also want to highlight, you have people like yourself that create blogs for, their personal portfolio. And I think that is really great too. And it's something that I'm glad hasn't gone to the wayside by social media. I think, I put a lot of stuff on Facebook, but blogs are still a wonderful resource for article types of, posts or, other techniques. It's a mechanism and format that is very conducive to processing that information. And I think the way you write it, and I'll tell you what, the Catalina is probably my favorite build out of all yours because I know what you went through to make it look like that.
That's the biggest failure on the website as well.
Oh,
we could talk about my website in a minute and why that came about. At times I am concerned that the value of it is not there anymore, as it were. The emphasis has so much shifted, the engagement has so much shifted to Facebook and maybe other forms of social media, which I just don't engage in. I'm not on Instagram or anything like that, which I really love those things. But it's the same reason that I still buy a magazine, actually. I still subscribe to Scale Aircraft Modeling, which I've started to contribute to, and Airfix Model World. For me, there's still a lot of value in a well-written article, which I cannot get yet from Facebook, to be honest. I can get a lot of other fantastic things from Facebook, but I can't get that.
I would agree. It's the story behind it. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, but you got to know what those words are sometimes to understand what's in the picture. I can see a post on Instagram or Weathered Models is actually a fantastic page on Facebook.
Yes, I belong to that. I observe that. Amazing stuff on there.
So good. And it's like, man, I want a dissertation on what you did to achieve that kind of finish. And it is hard to find on Facebook. And the other problem is, if you don't save it or, literally download it, it's gone. You can't find it again.
The threads are the one part of the forum-based communities that I think are superior because, 10 years from now, we can go back and look at that Catalina build that Jon did and look at how he dealt with the absolute nightmare that was that canopy and what his solution for that was. And then the other thing is, I think the same thing happened to the forums, Jon, that you're alluding to, which is they were very, very general to begin with. And then part of the reason why I think they sort of fell out of favor, quote unquote, a little bit, I mean, with the exception of, some of the big ones like Hyperscale, is very, very specialized forums then sort of became the next outreach. So instead of plain talking, now all of a sudden I've got 1/72nd scale Japanese aircraft forum. That's very, very focused on just a particular segment of one genre of the hobby.
Which has value for the technical side of things, as Jon was saying earlier, but is a narrowing. There's a lot more places to look now.
I think it's really similar to music. The music industry provided all of us with, right or wrong, good or bad, no matter where you stand on it. They would release all these great albums and, all these great bands. And it's not like that anymore. No. It's completely different now. The downside is there's, music from, sort of a generalized perspective isn't nearly what it was. There aren't these mega bands, there aren't the Metallicas and the U2s and the, the Beatles and things like that. But the upside is you can literally go out on the internet and find a million different kinds of music if you're willing to look for it, if you're willing to search, and there's so much of I guess there's so many more choices. It's just much harder to find, like you're mentioning.
And I mean, this would be straying from the subject of the podcast, so I wouldn't expect this to make it in. But I think that observation is really astute, and I think it's affecting many areas in life. I do look at my daughters and think, when I was their age, we all listened to the same music. We all followed the top 40 on the Sunday afternoon. We all cohered around these common reference points, which held our communities together in some ways. In this country, we always had a very limited number of TV channels back then, so everyone watched the same TV programs and so forth. And that just doesn't happen anymore. It's a much, much much, much more fragmented experience. And I do have concerns for that in terms of society in general, but this is the way the world is. And like you said, I'm not hitting on technology or anything like that. It's a technological revolution that we are living through, and there will be incredible upsides to that as well. But it has affected and will affect the modeling world. And those technologies brought disruptors along with them. I think part of the tribalism maybe we were talking about earlier is, again, to do with timing, is that old schools of authority, the magazines, the IPMS Society, whatever it might be, found that new people were coming in and had somewhat different ideas and were now very easily able to disseminate those ideas. And, some of those groups are disruptive. And if you're going to be disruptive, there will probably be a cost to that. Everyone has to learn to cope with one another through that change. For me personally, I just think it's been overwhelmingly positive. My modeling has accelerated over the last 5 or 6 years because of my engagement with it through Facebook, just because the access to inspiration is so much more frequent and there's so much more conversation going on around about how people are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, and with that too, it's for me and Scott is a perfect example. That, and like you said, just within the last 5 years, that's critical, I think. And for me, even within the last 2, I've put myself out there a little bit more, try to get to know people, and some of these people are my best friends. They're flying to shows for me. They're coming to my house. We're eating funfetti cake, and we're going to the nationals. Like, these things are not possible without Facebook and social media. We had a little bit with, I think, Missing Links and Hyperscale, but it was never to where it is today where, for better or worse, the disruption is helped in that sense for the shows. I mean, countless people we met at the last IPMS Nationals. Oh, this was my first show. I saw it online. You posted this, you mentioned that. And I would assume that you've probably experienced the same thing with Telford, where you're seeing a newer, potentially different demographic of individuals coming that weren't present at shows 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, maybe. I do go to Telford every year, and I was there last autumn. It's hard to tell at the moment. It's hard to tell. I hope it does go now. Certainly online, you see a lot more people coming along who are participating in the hobby who are not necessarily part of IPMS and so forth. But I think it's easy to forget how recent these changes are and to forget what it was like to not have them. I think this even potentially lies between controversies about the whole future, as a gloss coat and stuff like that. Because, I've only had a smartphone for 8 years. I think before 8 years ago, I just had a normal phone. And I know Facebook's been around since, 2006 or 7 or something. But it's easy to forget. It's not that long ago that we didn't have it. And, back then it was a credible material. And all of a sudden it's not a credible material. And it's easy to forget what it was like. Because it wasn't that long ago, really. It wasn't that long ago.
Right. I mean, I was very fortunate. I went to shows with my dad back in, the 90s. And it was different. And like you said, even in the early 2000s, I think about when I went to shows, it was much more of a, like, hey, it's me and my dad, or it's just me. Like, I remember going to school in Florida, and I went to one show by myself. And, I'm sure there were people there that I would have loved to hang out with, but the communication mechanism wasn't really there. And and it goes back to your point around disruption and looking at IPMS and saying, today people don't need this society. And I hate to say that. I'm on the board of IPMS USA. And, one of the things I want to do is make the society evolve to incorporate these different mediums, these different platforms, and the different ways we approach the hobby to keep people engaged with the society. And I do think there's a value to the society. And, the Nationals is its crown jewel for that matter, and what it does for inspiration, friendship, social gatherings. I mean, just the whole good time mantra is exemplified at that show. And that's one of the things that the society facilitates. And I think there's other aspects of the society that can succeed as well, but it's difficult in this age when there are other options and they're readily available and they're free.
I remember my first magazines that I bought for the hobby when oh, wow, they have modeling magazines. Very cool. I remember opening them up and being tremendously disappointed because most of the photographs were in black and white, and a lot of the photographs were very, very small. And while they were inspirational, it was sort of a limited ability to really tap into what was being presented. And, now with social media, you've got multiple platforms. You can choose a platform like us that, these crazy guys that want to do an audio podcast about what is a visual hobby, or you can go on YouTube and watch a video and sort of everything in between.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. And I am particularly interested in Jon's point about still having a place for the IPMS, because I passionately believe that there is still a place for the IPMS. I mean, I can only speak for this country, and I'm a member, but I don't participate in anything beyond that. I think Telford is a fantastic event, and I want Telford to succeed. And I hope that COVID and Brexit don't threaten that, because like you said, there are other options and they're readily available. And I hope we don't end up killing the goose that laid the golden egg, if you see what I mean. I believe that what we need is that sort of healthy mix of progressives, people who are pushing the boundaries and say, let's go there. And the Conservatives are saying, and let's remember where we've come from and try and carry everyone together into it. And I think that can be done. But I definitely believe there's a place for the IPMS, but it does need to change because the world is evolving and things need to evolve along with it.
Yeah. And, with that, where's IPMS fit in? I love when manufacturers, really, treat the IPMS with a lot of, they help them. That's what I'm trying to say is, I look at Andy's hobby headquarters, he chose to come to the IPMS Nationals in Vegas and make a huge announcement with the new stud kit. I mean, never, that type of, community and using that venue as an expression of this. And it's does so much for the organization and then also the hobby itself. And goes back to your point with, social media and having the information right away. I mean, Scott live streams the announcement. Back 10, 15 years ago, we'd hear trickles on hyperscale, potentially a photograph, and then there'd be a magazine article about it. Now you can literally see someone physically holding it, moving it around, talking to the person who designed it, all within an instant, live. Yeah. And that's unbelievable for the hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. And it promotes engagement face to face. I mean, I've been to Telford several times. It's about 200 miles from where I live. It's a significant journey in UK terms, and go there for the whole day and not speak to a single other person. I have done that and then come home again. Whereas now, at least I know that person, I might actually go up to them and say, hey, you're such and such, and start to have a conversation. And that makes it a completely different experience. Still valuable. When I went on my own and would wander around, it's inspirational for me. I've gone because I enjoy it and I really enjoyed participating in it. But if you can get over that hurdle to making it more of a relational thing rather than just I'm looking at all these subjects.
Transactional,
into a whole different realm of experience.
Jon drug us, I say kicking and screaming and all jest. But, he was so passionate because he's been to so many of these national shows. He's so, for him, that part of the hobby, that social part of it, and that IPMS piece of it is so much a part of his experience. And he was right. It was fantastic. I'd never been to a Nats. Literally, I'm 52 years old. I've been doing models since, seriously since I was 21 or 22 years old. Never been to one. And then, to return the favor, I drug him kicking and screaming into podcasting. So, turnabout is fair play.
Yeah. And, just echoing what Scott said, and really goes back to what you said, Jon. When I grew up, I'd go to the Nationals with my dad and, he had his friends and, I didn't really have any. And even when I was going into my 20s, I would go to them and I wouldn't really, I'd talk to people, but it wasn't wasn't that all, immersive. I had some friends. It was okay. But now it's literally the day is not long enough to connect with everyone. Yeah. It's insane. I love it. And I can't wait for it this year. And like you said, and there's value to both. And I don't judge anyone for any experience that they want to have. Some people love to go there quietly by themselves, enjoy the contest room, enjoy surfing the vendors, spend their money, maybe chat with somebody, and maybe not. And that for them is their year. And that is fantastic. And we love those people too. And then on the other side, there's, gregarious social butterflies like myself who won't shut up when talking to people. But it's a venue where those, essentially polar opposite personalities have one focus, and it's the hobby, and they both get joy out of it. And IPMS helps facilitate that.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So I think I hate this phraseology, but the unique selling point of IPMS is to provide that context in which those relationships can be established and grow. Because lots of other things can be provided elsewhere. And that's it. It provides this focal point where people can come. And because I think it's sort of my philosophy in life, I suppose. I believe in embodied existence. I think what we're doing now is fantastic, that we can talk across time zones and thousands of miles. That's amazing. But still, it will never, in my opinion, replace embodied interactions. That's why we love coming together. And that's why I think your podcast, and I know the Plastic Model Mojo and the Model Geeks, those three in particular. Maybe I'm doing a disservice to others, but they really pushed the IPMS Nationals in the USA, and that I hope has done IPMS USA a fantastic service, because it's just shown it's not about the organisation existing for its own sake or for its own ends, but providing this context in which you guys can get together, meet one another, and that is very important for the future of the hobby, I think.
Yeah, maybe we're biased, but if you talk to Dave and Mike at the PMM or Darren and co over at the Geeks, we've said it. I truly believe we moved the needle for Vegas.
I think you did, yeah.
There are some people there. They came up to our table, and the Geeks and the Plastic Model Mojo had the same experience, where they're like, you know what? I heard you guys talking about it. I've never been. I drove all here by myself, left my wife at home, told her I'm going to Vegas for 3 days to look at models, and plastic models, that is. And she's probably like wondering what I'm doing out here. But like those people came out of the woodwork. And we've stayed in touch too. And that's the impetus of the group builds. The Geeks have the A4, we have the Sherman, and the community that was built around, emanated from that show, is something that we couldn't get otherwise. And that's why I tell people, when you think about a national membership at IPMS, you are facilitating this. Can I give you something quantifiable? No. If you want ones and zeros behind what you're going to benefit, this probably isn't the right conversation to have. It's around what you talked about it, and the ability to connect with others around a common theme, and that theme is scale modeling.
Yeah, and most of us are not in it for the ones and zeros. And I appreciate businesses have to be in it for that, but we're not in it for that. And,
right.
And I think the other thing that you've managed to achieve in terms of I think the podcast modeling community is astonishing, because I've been into podcasts for a long time, and often in a particular genre, you'll have podcasts and they don't necessarily acknowledge one another. They don't exist in a network necessarily. Whereas you guys, all very different with different features, and yet maintaining some sort of community across the different podcasts. And the fact that it was 3 podcasts that went to the Nationals together to do that, again, showed it's not about us building a community with some sort of boundary around it and establishing our tribe and our empire or whatever it might be. It crossed all of those boundaries, and I think that speaks probably louder than you might know or appears on the face of it.
One of the things that we did in Vegas was we had a podcast meet and greet. I don't know that it was the apex of the idea was necessarily to bridge the gap between podcasts, but it was very, very effective to realize that, just because your podcast, like in the Geeks case, is almost all about aircraft, whereas the Posse tends to generally gravitate towards armor and science fiction, because that's kind of what we do. It doesn't matter, because the just like you guys were talking about, IPMS is about collaboration, getting that opportunity to talk about something that you love and you're passionate about with other people that have similar passions and similar interests.
Yeah.
There's no barriers. We're all friends here. The hobby is so small. Why close someone out? Because you're going to see them, if not physically, certainly online. And who wants that? And it just all goes back to you just try to be happy and create positive vibes, and everybody's looking to have fun, and everybody can have fun in their own way. And John, I hope you consider coming over to the Nats one time.
Well,
next year is Texas, and
one day I'd like to, but I'm afraid not looking possible for me for certainly the next few years. My wife and I do have a dream one day to do a massive road trip across America. Do like Atlanta, San Francisco, New York in a car or something like that.
You got to come out west, man. That's where the beauty is. I'm learning that. I just got here.
Yeah, I've only been to America once. I was fortunate to get paid to go to a conference in San Francisco, and a friend happened to be getting married in Omaha. The adjacent weekend.
Oh, wow.
I've been to Omaha in December. Yeah, it's...
Oh, God.
But I'm jealous of you guys. I'm jealous that in America you have this scene really where you have, I think podcasts are pioneering it, where you have different communities. Over here, we don't have that. When I think of Telford, I don't see any means by which what you're talking about there could happen over here. And yet we have all these magazines. It's just, and in America, your magazine landscape is a desert. It's very odd. And yet we have magazines coming out of our ears, to be honest.
Yeah, it's crazy. I will say, what I'm really jealous about Telford is kind of the focus of the show, in a sense, for the special interest groups. That's something that has not caught on over here. When the IPMS Nationals, it's unfortunate, and I say this with all true heart, felt is that it's for a lot of people it's a competition. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But the focus, there's the vendor room and the contest. Now, fortunately, we've carved out a good social swath in each of those, but the focus of displaying your models at the IPMS Nationals is to compete, not to display them in a group setting like Telford. And you see the massive hall where, we got guys that come from my old club in Pittsburgh. They go to the U.S. Air Force SIG, and literally they love going there. They put their model on display. They're not worried about entering the competition. They're drinking with the guys. They can hang out with the Czechs afterwards. It's that type of display and community that is not present at the IPMS Nationals, which is unfortunate. And I'm very jealous, and I can't wait to see it at Telford one day.
Yeah, that is a fantastic feature of Telford. Yeah.
Because the contest how many people enter the actual contest at Telford?
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, but the contest isn't particularly big, and also not massively. Like, you could easily go to Telford and not even bother looking at the competition. It used to be up in a different floor in a mezzanine room. This year, because everything was much smaller, there were more people looking around it, but it's a bit of a faff, really, to look around it because it's crowded and the timing is limited because we have a much shorter timescale than you do in the USA for the show. And I don't pay much attention to it. I go and have a look, but really for me, the value is in walking through the endless other tables and displays, which are highly variable in quality. And I think that's fantastic. I think everyone feels equally able to just bring their stuff and put it on display. And I really appreciate that aspect of it.
And that's one thing I'm definitely a little jealous about is those pockets of that community there is something.
It's more than pockets. I'd say that's the main. That and the vendors are the two big parts of it. I do hope it gets back to the previous scale at which it was. I mean, it was a lot smaller last year. I still had a fantastic time, and for the first time, I was there for both days. But I do hope it begins to recover back to what it was in terms of scale.
I think Telford will be there. Once we get through this and go into an endemic and learn to live with everything, I think, you'll definitely see it. People are itching. And from what I saw from the show this year from Ivan, the social aspect was still there. It seemed like people were having a great time, and it was really that outlet that they needed after being cooped up forever. And we felt the same way in Vegas, to be honest.
Yeah. No, it was very good from that perspective.
With Telford, do you bring stuff to display, or you purely go as kind of just want to attend and have a good time?
Yeah, I just attend and have a good time. This year, I did take some models to enter into the competition. I don't like competing, and I certainly had no expectation of winning anything, but I believe in the event. And I don't belong to an IPMS club, which has a table, and the SIG that I belong to wasn't displaying. So I thought, at least I can do my bit of bringing something along for people to see. And I think I put in quite a few. I think I probably put in 9 models.
Nice.
And, I got a silver, I think, for a helicopter. Nothing else was in contention for anything. That's fair enough. It shouldn't have been. I know where the flaws were, and I know there were the things which were better, but it was about showing stuff, really.
100%. And that's, I made Scott drag something to Omaha, and he friggin' won. But, that's the whole aspect. When I tell people, it's like, listen, there's no standard. You don't have to build to any, literally just bring it, put it on the table. That's an accomplishment in my mind. And I respect everybody that does that. And it's unfortunate that they have to be judged, but that's why I take literally thousands of photos at the show, because everything is unique. Everything tells a story. And I want to show, my little bit of respect to that person for bringing and putting their stuff on the table. And that's what I encourage everybody to do on this side of the pond is, bring it. Doesn't matter. It's any given Sunday. Who knows? You might win. Judges may love it. And you don't know what else is going to be there. And we try to just promote that. So I completely understand. And it's great to support the event like that.
Well, and you get to see models or genres that maybe you don't even think about. Maybe you don't even initially have an interest. Like we have a good friend, John Everett, and he brought these dinosaur models. And, I don't have any interest in building a model of a dinosaur, but to see his pieces, and I actually got to judge that category. And so really take some time and dive into the art and the care and the love and the passion is really inspiring. There's dioramas that people invest, hundreds of hours into electronics, lights and different things that are happening, again, something that I don't really have an interest in. And then people that are scratch building. Best of show at Vegas was a scratch built sky crane helicopter. It's just amazing to see that somebody can put together something like that without a kit, and so you get inspiration from things that maybe you wouldn't even realize. You wouldn't go with the intention of being inspired by, but yet the inspiration happens anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of inspiration, John, who are some people that inspire your work? Who are some people that have had an impact on how you see your modeling and where you want your modeling to go?
I think inspiration's an interesting thing because it's a moving target. And I think people need to realize they can be an inspiration even if they themselves feel that they're not at the top of the game, if you know what I mean. You can be inspired by someone who's just that one step ahead of you. So I mentioned earlier on that my whole collection was started off really by an article by Jonathan Mock. And there was another author around at the same time on the same magazine called Ted Taylor, who's passed away now. And I only met him once, and he was very influential. And then you get to a certain thing, and the modelling world evolves, and you evolve, and then so you look for new sources of inspiration to go to the next level. And I think I mentioned some of those names earlier. I think John Chung, Fanch Lubin, Ben Schumacher. There's a chap making a 132nd H-34 Choctaw helicopter, which I think he's doing on Facebook, and it's also on ARC. He's called Oliver During or something like that. Astonishing. Absolutely. It's not well publicised, but if you can find photos of it, he's doing the interior scratch built, and the painting is amazing. So you just see people around like that. Tony Bell again, who I mentioned earlier. Yeah, they're probably some of my inspirations at the moment. But I'm in a strange position where I've been doing it for quite a long time now, and you sort of get into a groove and you still get pushed and inspired, but you also sort of know I know what my style is. And yes, it will evolve and it will change, but I think it will be by increments rather than by large jumps, because there are limitations. My philosophy is I want to build my stash before I die. At the moment, I think it's 178 unbuilt aircraft in the loft. I'm building 8 per year. My father passed away at 68. If I can make it to 68 in 25 years' time, I'll have done those models. Now, I do have other goals in life. Don't worry. That's not like going to be the measure of my motivation is to make models and to have them on display. I think Paul Budzig is another name, a great inspiration. I'm never going to make models like he does, but he really pushes you. I started soldering because of him, and I got an Iwata RG3 mini spray gun airbrush because of him. And he's a very nice guy, very helpful. If you send them emails and stuff. And he was on a podcast recently. I've mentioned that for him, it was all about the journey and not so much about the destination. For me, it's about the destination. The journey is important, but I am motivated by finishing models. I sit in my living room with all those models and I look at them and I derive pleasure from them, even if I know what's wrong with them. So I've got to be finishing the models. And so that sort of drives me on. The downside of that is I will never have a magnum opus. I will never have something which I think will be, up there amongst the best, because I don't have the time for that. I'm churning them out. And so you do with what you can with what you've got. And that's the choice that I'm making.
What about maybe not necessarily scale modelers per se, but like Luke Towan or Chuck Doan, or modelers that do things either outside of your realm or don't necessarily build kits? Do you have anybody that inspires you like that?
Yeah, I do watch Luke Towan's channel, and I find the results he gets astonishing. For what he does. That is very smart. Oddly enough, model railway. We call model railways. There's a chap called Dave Clark. But there are some model railroading YouTube channels. I have no interest in model railroad. I like anything in miniature. I suppose if there was absolutely nothing else, I'd make dolls' houses, because things which are small are just inherently cool. So, model trains. People who do that really well, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, when my son was young, we got hooked on Thomas the Tank Engine, and, my son loved it for the stories. And I loved it because back then it wasn't CGI. It was actually model building. Yeah. And to this day, I still have the DVDs, and I'll watch them from time to time because their attention to detail in the scenery and the presentation the work was amazing.
Yeah. Actually, I've just remembered it. It's Dean Park Junction. Dean Park Junction is a YouTube video channel worth looking up. He's got a great layout it's a UK style layout, but from a UK perspective, it's great.
Okay, so maybe John, we take a trip over to your website and talk about some of the models that you've built in the past that have caught Scott and I's eye, and we can walk through them and
sure. Let me just bring it up.
Just give a little talk. And specifically, again, the one I'm always when I look through the long list of models that you have, and you have a ton on there. Always drawn, and I don't know why it is, but I'm always drawn to the ones that say Monogram or Airfix or. Some of these old brands that, they don't really see the light of day anymore. It's really interesting to see, someone as talented as yourself take that, hunk of soap essentially and turn it into something that's, outstanding. And again, I want to highlight your consolidated Catalina. She is beautiful and, probably one of the best I've ever seen. And to take that kind of kit and turn it into that. And then also the color pattern you used. It's really amazing. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about that build? What drove you to it, and kind of what was your vision, and were you able to execute on the vision that you had?
Sure. My approach to modelling is a little bit unusual. I'm a one model at a time guy. I don't have a shelf of doom. I have finished everything which I have started. Nothing's gone in the bin. I used to have a fairly rigid, I keep a very complicated Excel spreadsheet, which tracks everything I'm doing. And so the order in which they were bought was the order in which they were built. And that has long gone out of the window, and I try and chop and change. But eventually, that model has just been kicking around in the stash for a long time, and it's been there the longest. So it becomes its turn to build. There's nothing more behind it than that. And it's a big model. And I was aware of some of the inaccuracies in the kit. So Belcher Bits, that's right, have made a resin tail to correct what's perceived to be a problem with the kit tail. If anyone knows anything about Catalina, it's obviously got a tricycle undercarriage. It's a struggle to get it on its nose anyway. And then I was going to stick this, it's a hefty piece of resin. It's not solid, it is hollow, but on the rear end. So I wanted to do that I do like to make my models as accurate as I can within reason. I'm not going to invest too much time or money into it, but if I can do it, I will attempt it. So it simply became its turn to build that model, and that was the main change which was going to be made to it. I spent a lot of time researching that particular scheme because it does come within the kit, but it's very inaccurate. This is what we were talking about earlier, the value of Google, and you can find photos of the real thing, start making your own decisions. They might be wrong, but you can at least, you've made your decision and you can justify why you've made it. And so there are all kinds of little things that need to be made, like there's a huge football antenna over the canopy that needs to be added, other various bits and pieces. So yes, that took about 3 months to get together, which for me is a long project. The main issue was fairing that resin tail in, which it was a bit rough, and then having to sort the surface detail out, which I wasn't happy with. I have a philosophy of, you do it and then you don't redo it too many times, because otherwise you get bogged down, and I need to get the project finished and moved on to the next one. So a fair amount of aftermarket in it. And of course, in the end, although I'd stuck loads of weight in the nose and been balancing it carefully throughout construction, when the final pieces were attached, it didn't so much sit on its tail, it's just the main undercarriage collapsed. It just couldn't take the weight. It weighs nearly a kilogram, I think. So that's why in the photographs it's all on a stand. So yes, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but the philosophy behind my articles is it's not necessarily so much about how things are done, although I do approach that sometimes, but I do want to provide an interesting article for someone that wants to know something about how to make that model in terms of replicating the subject. So there's quite a lot in there in terms of, if you want to make it like the photograph, you'll need to do this, you'll need to do that. Again, that's what we were talking in terms of the value of forums earlier. That's one thing which I am trying to do, is to say, if you're interested in making an accurate Catalina, I don't have a definitive answer to that, but here maybe are some pointers along the way, or things to look out for, or that you might want to consider if you were going to approach it with the same sort of philosophy.
So for our listeners, you can see Jon's work over on his website, which is Jon Bryon, JONBRYON.com. He's got blog posts and also articles on all of these aircraft that we'll be talking about. And then, Jon, I just wanted to, your Catalina was actually the first one when I started to know who Jon was.
Right.
I think I had seen your builds before, but following along on the construction on that was fascinating. And like you said, the two areas of the model where I probably would have bailed, I'm just going to be completely honest, but you managed to get through not only the tail, but through that canopy.
Yeah, the canopy is rough.
And make the canopy work. And you planned, and then you ran into a wall, and then you backed up and you planned, and then you eventually just said, I'm doing this. And it's amazing how it turned out.
Thank you. That's very kind of you indeed. I do appreciate the compliments. One thing I do, if I can, on a project is to try something new. You can't do it all the time. But on that one, I tried soldering for the first time, which was a bit of a revelation in terms of using etched metal. And, I don't claim to be good at it at all. But that's definitely something worth learning or having a go at. And then the other thing was there are no decals on that model. It's all masked. And I've done that before, but I tried more complicated things than I tried before on that particular one.
Yeah, the wheel wells stuck out to me. Your solder work, and it's crisp. It looks really good, and night and day above what was provided in the kit. So I think you can, hang your hat high after completing that one, because, oh man, I see more of those in stashes than finished. So kudos
it's
to
big.
you.
Yeah, it's big. I think there does come a point where, I wouldn't buy that again. There comes a point where, just because of size, plastic begins to have its limits. Like the undercarriage collapsed on that. Lots of other people's haven't. That's probably my problem. I have built a 1/48 scale Hercules many, many years ago, and just keeping the centerline seam stuck together under the weight of the wings is a challenge.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
They just become limits of the material, really.
Right. I saw what is that, lead shot and epoxy you put in the PBY as well. So
yeah, a lot of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, it looks great. And when I look at other builds, I even like going to the monogram hind, sticking with our friendly brand monogram, seeing what you could do with that kit again is very inspiring. Taking something that's looks like it's been carved out of a bar of soap and turning it into it's just a really sweet model, and I love the scheme on it too.
Thank you. So I mean, that's one aspect again of my website is it's warts and all. So that was built in 1997. I didn't know what I'm doing, and that's in my view that's a terrible model. But the point of the website, partly for me, and the website is entirely for me, it's not for anyone else, is to chart the progress. So it starts in 1994 and it looks terrible. Hopefully it progresses over time. Yeah, it took a lot longer than someone joining the hobby might do now. Just as we talked earlier, it took a lot longer to figure things out back then. But I'm not ashamed to put those models up there. So I don't think that's any good now. But, that's where I was 25 years ago. Part of it is for me charting that journey, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value. I really do think there's a lot of value in that approach and documenting your builds and seeing the journey and watching as your work progresses. And then, like you said, it's kind of a dynamic, what inspires you and how you see your builds, that constantly changes. And so you can see that documented in your photos. So that's terrific.
I mean, the reason the website came about is it was the end of 2004. I just finished my PhD dissertation and was awaiting the oral examination. And I was exhausted from that. And I took a month out and thought, I need to do something during this month. So I thought, I'll write a website. And again, back there, it was, you learn HTML4 and CSS and wrote a website. And it looked substantially different to how it does now, and started photographing the models, which I built up until that point and writing a very brief paragraph on them usually. The thinking behind it largely was, A, to learn how to do that, but B, I knew I was going to go and live in China. That was what the plan was. I wasn't going to be able to look at these models where I was living. They were stuck in my parents' loft or somewhere. And so I wanted to be able to see them wherever I was. So it became a virtual showcase. That's when I said earlier, it's for me, that's what its fundamental reason is. Even the articles I like reading them back sometimes to remind myself of what I did and of a certain time in life. And so it becomes a virtual showcase for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would like to talk about your AH-64DI, the Israeli Hasegawa Apache that you did. And I know from a few people that have built that kit that it can result in a great model like yours did, but you earn it.
Thank you. Yeah, that has an IsraCast conversion set, which, the quality on that is mixed, but it's pretty good. I guess this is the closest I get to armor modeling in a way. I think I would like to approach helicopters more as armor subjects. I haven't had the nerve to do it yet, but I think people who make really good helicopters and finish them really well do approach them a bit more like tanks, to be honest, than aircraft. But thank you. I built that alongside. What I do sometimes is to make things a bit more efficient is I batch build. So I had two AH-64s in my stash and I built them alongside each other. So it's not necessarily I build one kit at a time. It's one project at a time, I suppose.
Nice. One of the other ones that caught my eye, just because it's probably massive, is the ICM 48 scale Foxbat. I mean, that thing is a beast.
Yeah, that is a great looking aircraft. I don't think I'd appreciated how good looking an aircraft it is until I built one. And there's a big difference sometimes between seeing something in 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. And I've never seen a Foxbat in real life.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed making that.
And again, you're taking, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the ICM kit is the greatest out there.
It's actually pretty good. No, it is the best. It's the best Foxbat out there. It has some engineering quirks. ICM have really come on a long way in the last few years.
Nice.
And I think their engineering has improved even since that one. That has some very odd engineering decisions in it, but it's essentially accurate. And it was a pleasure to put together. So that's a good model.
I love the undercarriage. I love the underside and the way you weathered it. The one thing that kind of stands out to me, and maybe this is why I don't build aircraft that much, how many decals did you have to put on this thing? All those little stencils. Holy cow.
Yeah, I love decals. And I love stencils. And I've built a lot of MiGs in recent years, and they all had, not all of them, a lot of them had specialized stencil sheets or sets from a company called Begemot. I don't know how to pronounce it. They're out of Russia. They do fantastic decal sheets. The instructions are hard work, but bazillions of stencils on a lot of those MiGs. And I love it. For me, I look at tanks and think, why would you ever do the tracks? But some people love it, don't they?
Well, I mean, but it's interesting you say that. These little things really make, without them, it's a great aircraft. But when you you start and you get close and you see all of them, and it really draws your eyes to different panels, even different weathering areas that you've achieved. I mean, it really sets the character of the model, and I think they're absolutely fantastic. It is very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, my modelling style is pretty slapdash in some ways, and I don't like weathering. I don't enjoy it. It's probably the part of the modelling which I enjoy the least. So sometimes I have to grit my teeth and do a bit more. And it's the area in which, if you were to say, what do you need to grow? And I say, I need to grow in the quality of my weathering. But for me, it's the bit I want to get past. The bit I enjoy is the bodywork, oddly enough. I love removing seams. For me, it's all about doing the bodywork.
See, I'd build tank tracks all day long and not fill seams and rescribe panel lines. So.
I love filling seams. I used to hate it, and I'm convinced it's about getting the right materials. And once you've got the right materials, it becomes a joy.
So let's talk about that. You know, I'm an amateur aircraft modeler, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are curious to hear this. One of the biggest things when building an aircraft is that ghost seam on the fuselage. So when you're putting that fuselage together, what type of material, like you said, adhesive, bonding agent, otherwise, what are you using that you prefer to give you that therapeutic release in life? And
so I have a very controversial answer to that question. Ghost seams are the bane of modelling in general, I think, but particularly aircraft modelers. And I used to get so frustrated. 15 years ago, I was making models with Revel Contactor cement, which is a pretty horrible cement to use, really, in retrospect. And you'd get rid of the seam, you'd sand it all out, and then like a month later, you'd just have this groove where before there was nothing. Then I moved to Tamiya extra thin, and that was better, but it still often left a ghost seam. And I, in the end, again, I was largely in isolation. I was just thinking, well, maybe this is just what people have to live with. Maybe you can't get rid of it. And maybe when people say they're removing seams, they just are left with a ghost seam. And of course, I've subsequently discovered that was incorrect. But the way I solve it, and I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and I don't recommend anyone else does this because you take your life into your own hands when you do, but it's just to use super glue. I use super glue for all my major joints. So when I'm putting a fuselage half together, it's with super glue. You know, that's a high risk, high reward strategy. You don't get any adjustment opportunities. You put the glue on, you stick it together.
One and done.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the methodology. Again, super glue is a very Marmite. Oh, I don't know if that makes much sense in the US context. We have a phrase in the UK, which is a Marmite thing. Marmite's this stuff you can buy to put on bread or whatever. And I think it tastes disgusting. And you either love it or you hate it. And so when there's a thing which you either love or you hate, we say it's a Marmite thing. Super glue is like that, I think. The people always say it just dries or cures so hard you can't sand it, you can't rescribe it. And it is tough to rescribe. I've for years now been using a thick super glue by Everbuild. You just buy it on Amazon. It's like a thick super glue. I've never found that it sets particularly hard. I can go back to it 3 days later and still sand it. It's almost different to the plastic. That's my experience. And then, of course, people are doing the same thing now with the black super glue, which has been about for decades, but it's become popular because Ammo and VMS make it or whatever. And that's great stuff too. Yeah, very good. Sometimes if you use a thin super glue, that can set really rock hard. I did that on my Eduard I-16, and I used that for some reason. That was a mistake. It was very difficult to sand out. It is still difficult to rescribe, that is true. The other thing you can add is VMS make something called CA glue filler, which is like powder. And you can mix that with thick CA and it becomes more like a putty. Now, you can produce bubbles, which you then have to deal with later on, but it is much easier to sand and you can scribe it quite easily, which is lovely material. So yes, for any joint where I know the seam is going to need to be removed and I don't want to go seam, I'll be using super glue. For things like wings to fuselages where usually you want to retain some sort of panel line, then Tamiya extra thin is absolutely fine. But I'm a big believer in super glue, and it has the added advantage of it just speeds everything up.
Do you ever have problems with seams popping though, because you're not actually bonding the plastic?
No, I never have. Doesn't mean I won't have a problem, but the stresses on them are usually not that great in my experience. Sometimes I might reinforce it from the inside, but generally I get away with the super glue.
That's awesome.
I do use quite a lot of it. I mean, I'm very generous with it. and that means a lot of sanding, but I love sanding. Once you discover Infini sanding products, and I've got all of them, they're just amazing. You're away. It's a joy to do it.
Nice. Now, do you use any accelerator when you have super glue, or are you pressure fit and then you just kind of let it cure on its own and you reattack maybe a day later or an hour later, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I rarely use accelerator because it can be a little bit unpredictable sometimes, but I do use it. But usually it's just stick the super glue on and stick it together. Obviously, I've done quite a lot of dry fitting up to that point, and I have various clamps around, and I want to make sure it goes together as well as it can. But gaps don't bother me because the super glue does do such a great job, in my opinion, of filling. But as I say, if you decide to use this method, you do so at your own risk. I'm not going to accept responsibility for whether it works for you or not, because other people hate the stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But, I agree with you. Try to minimize the use of accelerator, because sometimes it does craze plastic, depending on the manufacturer.
Yeah. And it can warp and bubble the super glue as well sometimes.
Yep.
And it might take, if the gap's big, then it might take several applications of super glue to smooth it out. One of the big things, I think I wrote a little article about this in my blog, is back in the day, materials just took forever to filler took forever to dry or cure. Enamel paints took forever to dry. And nowadays we live in an age where these materials, you can use them and then you can be going in minutes.
No, for sure. I mean, hell, TJ on our squad, he can start a model and finish it in the same day, and that includes glue, paint, wash, and weather. So it's really amazing how fast you can work.
I rarely need to wait for anything. Probably decals are the thing that you need to wait for the most.
Mm-hmm. Continuing on the theme of understanding aircraft modeling, I'd love to know about, when you love super glue, and super glue's arch nemesis is clear parts. So when you're working with clear parts, are you using, stationary white glue, or what type of adhesive are you using to attach those to the model?
Tamiya Extra Thin, or
really?
Guns Mr. Cement S. Yeah, now that is, and again, I don't accept any responsibility if it doesn't work for you, because as you know, the whole point of Tamiya Extra Thin is it's extra thin, and that means it ends up going to places where sometimes you rather it wouldn't go. If you're on the outside, you can get away with it. It's when it goes up the inside and wicks in between your windscreen and your instrument panel or something like that. So you have to use it extremely sparingly. But the one thing I never ever want is a canopy or a clear part coming adrift later on during construction or painting. Tamiya Extra Thin will just bond it. It will bond it, and it's not coming off once it's on. And it works on vac form canopies as well. But of course, I have the, again, oddity that in order to speed things up, and because I prefer the aesthetic, all of my aircraft are now built with closed canopies, and I close as much as I can. Air brakes, I want closed, unless they're normally out as an accuracy issue. I don't open panels. I don't hang ordnance unless I feel I have to, because life's too short and I want to move on. And I like the aesthetic of the... there's that Chris Becker, isn't there, on SMCG, who's always angling for things to be built with wheels up.
Gear up,
I really appreciate that. If there was some magic way of suspending them invisibly, then, gear up would be the way to go. But I can't be bothered with pilots, and I can't be bothered with making undercarriage doors fit either.
Yeah, there's something to be said about a clean aircraft. I love aircraft. Sometimes I like them, slung with every bomb, but I feel like, a fighter or, some of the ones that have just really good lines, they deserve to be, pristine and without ordnance in my mind, just because they look so good as an engineering marvel. I mean, the Foxbat is one of them. It's a gorgeous looking airplane.
Well, John, one thing we haven't really spoken about too much is airbrushing, and I want to talk about one of your recent builds that really highlights your airbrush work, and that's your Edward Polycarpov I-16, the Type 10 that you did recently. Just a beautiful build. Where did you kind of get the inspiration for that, and what's your airbrushing technique like?
As I said earlier, I only build post-World War II aircraft, and I do have a particular fascination because that means there are certain aircraft which I don't get to make. But some of them bled over after World War II and saw operational use afterwards. And the I-16 is a good example of that. It's a 1930s aircraft, which the Spanish were still flying in the late 1940s. So I really enjoy opportunities to build those sorts of aircraft. The inspiration to make that came because of just making conversation. And I think you guys participated, didn't you? We had that whole builder 48 scale aircraft in 48 hours. And I can't participate in those sort of things live, but I thought that's a good idea. I'll see if I can do that. And the I-16 in my stash, I thought, well, it's small, so maybe I could do it in 48 hours. Yeah, that was a complete mistake. There was no way that was getting done in 48 hours. I tried. I needed a new spine rebuilt out of super glue and plastic card because it's wrong. It needed a new canopy. It's a vac form windscreen because the one in the kit is wrong. It needed the ailerons needed rescribing. There was quite a lot of work that went into it. So I spent a couple of days working on it, then it slowed down. The scheme, because obviously people who are listening can't see it, is dark green and sand sort of color, and it's not really a mottle. It's more of a dendritic pattern of green over the sand color, which I decided to freehand with an airbrush. Now, I'm embarrassed to be saying how anybody should do anything because it's not particularly good, but for what it's worth,
yes, it is.
For what it's worth, I mean, it's obviously it's a small aircraft. You can hold it in the palm of your hand very easily. It's a Iwata Custom Micron B, so it's a 0.18 needle. I use lacquer paints almost exclusively. I think that's a mixture of Hataka and Mysticolor, maybe some MRP in there as well. Thin it as much as I can get away with, and then just spraying very, very fine. I still have an issue with lacquers, is occasionally they will spit. you'll just get this like random little spit of paint come out, which must be my issue. But I'm not a particularly skilled airbrusher, and I'm doing it just by trial and error. I couldn't tell you what pressure I'm spraying at, and I couldn't tell you how thin the paint is. All I can say is thin. And just go at it bit by bit. I think some people sometimes approach airbrushing and think they've got to do the whole thing in one go. But actually, you can just do it bit by bit. 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, half an hour here, half an hour there. You go back to it. The airbrush isn't going to go anywhere. The paint's not going anywhere. So it took a long time to do that. And, recent years I've had to start wearing an optivisor sort of thing. With the naked eye, it looks good. You put an optivisor on and you think, yeah, it looks not as good as it does. But hey, I don't wear glasses normally. So actually, the naked eye is what counts for me.
It looks like you've got some blending done post airbrush work too. Did you airbrush the base coat, or did you do filters, or how did you kind of reduce the contrast of those two colors when you were finished?
Yes. I'm trying to remember. I wrote an article in this for Scale Aircraft Modelling, actually, and it was all written down in there. A lot of it is a streaking product. So it's sort of a filter. I think it's an AK one. I can't remember which one it is. And I like to sort of brush that on fairly neat and then take a dampen brush and then move it around the surface. Some of it is the AK Interactive pencils around the nose area where the gun bulges are. So I do like to use those sort of products, and also oil paints. I usually give it a wash at some point and maybe a slight filter. But as I said, I'm not really into weathering. It's something I approach very haphazardly without too much vision or forethought. So I could do better.
Well, I think it's a great model. It really catches the eye. Now, are those markings, are those decals, or are they stenciled airbrush markings?
Yeah, they're all stenciled apart from the number on the tail fin, which is a decal, and unfortunately not quite the right font. Yeah, I learned some important lessons because the Spanish national insignia are circles. They're not as circular as they should be, and I've learned some lessons about how to improve that in the future. But yeah, they're painted on.
That's incredible. Well, Jon, any more questions? I cannot believe we have been talking for 90 minutes. Man, what a great conversation.
Well, it's very easy to talk when people are very skilled at making conversation. So thank you very much indeed for that. Yeah, feel free to visit my website. I do have a couple of thoughts on there, particularly about the productivity thing, which is something which sort of interests me because it's a perennial topic on modeling sites and on the podcasts, obviously, is how can people improve their output. One thing I would say is I think it's very easy to offer advice on that, but everyone is so different. Everyone's personalities are so different, and so much of it is personality dependent. I have a particular methodology, I have a particular personality, and so I do what suits me, and it would not suit other people. So I think if people are going to take advice, they need to make it fit with what they want and who they are. People often talk about things like palette cleansers and changing genre and scale and stuff. That does not work for me. I am not interested. If I need a quick build, I build a single engine prop. I can get it done in a month. And as you look at the website, there's quite a wide variety of color schemes. That just keeps me going. I could build something which is white, completely white, and then something which is multicolored camouflage. So there's enough variety for me there. People who are interested in building more, I think if you take a deliberate approach to it, you can really make a difference. But who am I talking to? I mean, Jon Bryon, he's pretty prolific, isn't he?
That's right. I've been getting bogged down lately.
Yeah. I mean, he's no TJ Holler, but he's pretty close.
Well, that's what you've got to TJ. I don't see enough models made by you, Scott. I don't know if it's because I'm looking in the wrong place, but are you posting that many?
It's a combination of I don't post a lot, but I have a 1-to-1 scale podcast that I do.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm sure this takes
a lot of time.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, if you don't mind, what's on the bench right now?
A Supermarine Walrus made by Airfix. So at the moment, I'm doing a little series of all the float planes in my collection. So I did Grumman Duck back in the autumn. This will be an Airfix kit. Airfix obviously is a company with a reputation at the moment. Again, you might say a Marmite product. This is meant to be one of their better ones, but I got the second boxing and the molding is rough. Actually, it's very rough, but the surface detail is good. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm a month in. It will be done by the end of February. Then after that, it's a Russian Beriev B4 by a company called Mars Model, which don't get enough love, but the molding on that looks fantastic. That's a Russian float plane.
I look forward to seeing that for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Jon, thanks so much for spending some time with us. Again, you can see his work at jonbryon.com, JONBRYON.com. Do you have any other social media sites where you show your work?
No, I mean, it is on Facebook as well. I think it's Jon's Models, something like that. I don't really post there. It's just a duplication of what's on the website in terms of photos. I just I'm all about the building, the website, and I do write some articles for scale aircraft modeling now, taking up enough of my time. I don't particularly want to be taking more photographs and spending more time on social media. I would love to if I had the time. If people do visit my website, I apologize. It is a bit slow. I'm not really into the technical side of those things anymore, but it gets there in the end. And I'm always trying to improve my photography. Need still to learn quite a lot on that.
Well, you're a great modeler. Really like your blog post as well. You have some good insight. We'd love to have you on again. This has been a great conversation. Keep sending us feedback. We really appreciate the interactions with you. And, thanks again.
Well, the pleasure is entirely mine. So thank you very much indeed for asking me. I feel very privileged and honored. And I would say encourage anyone out there. Anyone can make models like I do. Absolutely. No problem at all. I admire the people who have the real artistic vision. They're the guys who are really inspirational. The ones I mentioned earlier.
JB, thanks for joining us. And John, you take care.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Cheers, John. This was great. So nice to meet you.
Thanks a lot. And we'll be in touch at some point, and I'll try and find some more controversial things. Maybe really controversial. Modeling and class, modeling and education, modeling and religion. Right. No, I don't know. We won't go there. But
that's right.
Well, that was a really good interview. Jon is an absolutely fantastic aircraft modeler, and it's really interesting to get an insight into his perspective of the hobby.
He'll be at Telford.
He will.
Oh, he's going to Telford.
I fully expect to see his builds. I really want to.
Yes.
It's nothing like seeing someone's build in person. So, Doug, what do we have for our discussion point for this episode?
Oh, well, I want to talk about the reach and the positivity and the camaraderie that has been mentioned of the Posse itself. Not us on the podcast, but all of those of us who support us and who actually make such a big impact on us, especially in social media. About a week ago from the time of this airing, I placed an update on the Posse Facebook page and asked for feedback on what to do to improve from the final 5% perspective. I'm still working on the 48 scale Tamiya Achilles. And the response was amazing. I couldn't believe how much positive criticism I got. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't think about, I didn't know about, that people made recommendations on. I've never asked for feedback like that before. And so it was kind of cool. I'll admit, I was not close to, I really, the last 20% of this model is the last 5%. If that makes any sense. It seems like I'm putting a lot of time into doing this stuff, and I'm having a blast. I'm not complaining because it's really, really cool. So I ask what I can do, and I get Jesse Naughton giving me like a laundry list of things that I could do to improve that kit. And so I've been working on some of that stuff. Like bring more contrast to the running gear, tone down the tarps, adjust the color and sheen of those tarps, brackets for the spare wheels that are on the front, things like that. Stowage was a big thing from a lot of the guys, and it without a doubt needed it. Malk, Luke, Ed, Johan, a bunch of others chimed in, weathering and colors. Cliff Herring recommended I named it Mayberry. Smartass. John Murphy, Spud, asked about the headlights and guards, which aren't even on the instructions, so they're left off. But I think I will include them because I think they belong, even though even on the box art it's not there. So I was able to find those on the spruce, and I'll keep going. So I did some of the things they recommended. I post an update the next day, and I get more feedback and suggesting now take it this much farther, do this much work. And I got, hey, paint the fire extinguisher from Cody Kaczynski. Spud actually got on there and started adding pictures of those fire extinguishers, so I had a base to work from, different colors, different levels of weathering, and it's just been a blast. So to everybody that's helped me, everybody that's given me recommendations, thumbs up and thank you so much. So my question for you other guys is, what experiences have you had in interacting with the Posse that has had a positive effect on your modeling and your experience?
Yeah, thanks for that, Doug. That's a really interesting topic. I'd love to hear what TJ has to say about it.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, just being here and with you guys and then with this awesome community that's sprung up around our podcast, I mean, it's made me just a better modeler, I think. It encourages me, which is, I mean, I'm encouraged to build more. And if you build more, you get better, because the more you finish kits, the more you can improve, because you can improve with each one. One time specifically, and I had to go look up who it was because I couldn't remember who it was, and now I do remember. And this was a little while ago. This was a little bit before Nats. when I was working on my CNT Militia Woman bust, I posted a picture after I painted her eyes. It was the first thing I painted on the model because the eyes are very important. And I thought they were really cool. I thought I did a pretty good job. And Jamie Stokes gave me some very good feedback, which I then followed through with, and about just changing a simple thing with how I painted the eyes. And I agreed, and I repainted them, and they were way better because of that. When I saw Doug's question, I was like, I remember exactly that happening, but I just could not for the life of me remember who it was. So I went back and looked, and it was Jamie. So thank you, Jamie. That's just one example. I mean, on top of just the mostly positive feedback I get for when I post my work in the group. And I mean, it's just hearing that you're doing a good job makes you feel like you're doing a good job, which then I think makes you better, kind of. It's I don't know, it's kind of weird. But yeah, it's been amazing.
Cool. Grant, do you have any experiences you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would have to say, before I actually joined the Posse itself, I built a Kuba wagon conversion last year before, and I posted it to Scott. Scott was, helping me out with a few things, and Scott recommended some very key things I missed, oil coming out of one of the hubs, stuff like that, where the drain plug is on the side of the vehicle, there should be a little bit of fuel mark on there. Things like that have always been very, it's very positive and very, like you said, it's positive criticism, I guess you would say. And it's been always worked for me. I've had fantastic help from Brian Kruger. He's, helped me with STL files. He's helped me with looking at different subjects. I tell you what, if you ever have a chance to see, I think it's an Su-76, the conversion the Russians did with the Panzer III. If you ever have a chance to see his vehicle version of that, it's phenomenal. And we were at Nationals walking around the tables together, and he's like, oh yeah, there's the kit I use, you should get that. And I was like, oh gosh, yeah, and jumped on it right there. But overall, the feedback we get is very positive, and it's always meant in a good way. And I always want to make sure that I do the same for when people ask me, and they ask the group, what can I do, what can I change, and keep it as start it with a positive. You start it with a positive. You say, hey, this looks really good, and you should do this and this and this. But that's what I think.
That is awesome. Scott's a good guy, and he'll help you anytime he gets a chance. Ivan, how about yourself?
Yeah, I remember when we were doing the M3, M4 group build, and I was doing the Russian Lend-Lease M3. I wasn't exactly sure about how to weather it, and because I bought the Voyager set, about how damaged it would be, and certain. I wanted to do a night shift-esque build where it wasn't just out of the box, and I posted a picture where I'd added the main gun to it, but it was I bought the wrong gun for the wrong kit. It was too long. But luckily, Jesse Norton, he's someone who said, right, so this gun's too long for the exact version you're doing, but went out of his way to find me black and white references of like a vehicle that had that sort of gun, the right sort of tracks, even some battle damage that I wanted to model on it. The turret on the top had a certain casting bulge. So it was a massive help in me being able to create the kit I was doing to a real life reference rather than make some amalgamation of lots of references. And it's stuff like that. I've noticed the community that we've got around us aren't shy in helping. If you need help, they'll do everything they can. They'll go out of the way. When they should be doing stuff themselves, they'll drop everything they're doing to it's like, right, I'm going to help you with your build now. And it's like something Grant said, like the first time I spoke to him, pay it forward. They'll help you, you help other people. And so my part's quite a short part, but yeah, I've just noticed we've got an incredibly helpful, selfless community that stop at nothing to help each other and make each other feel really good about the modeling.
Yeah, mine really builds on that. I always go back to a good quote, and I feel like my parents told me this, surround yourself with good people. And if you surround yourself with good people, they're going to elevate you. And that's exactly what the community is for the hobby for me, is good people, good characters. And, when it comes down to help, I find that I actually get the most out of learning through seeing someone's work and then really going in and asking them questions on how they did it. Good example, Ian Bonner, another great modeler that we talk about a lot, part of the Cork Posse group. He has really elevated his game recently, but I think some of his 4BO finishes and then the pigment and dust work that he's doing at the end of his builds I'm talking world class. And I'm not even trying to blow smoke. I think TJ and Ivan would agree that guy, kid, he's another rising star, and it's really cool to be able to have that and openly talk about it, get that feedback on how he's doing it, share pictures, share results. And another two, I got to throw them out there, Grizz and Jackson, another two great examples of rising stars in the hobby, incredibly engaging, incredibly positive, incredibly helpful. And it's interesting, this is going to sound strange, and I'd be curious to hear other people that I have a lot of modeling books, and there's a lot of great people in those modeling books. But I have found that the people that I've engaged with through the community, online, in person, I've actually learned more from them than the pros in the books. And that might sound crazy, but I have gotten so much more out of a conversation and seeing their work either in person or online. And it's been so much more valuable than reading a book. Now, don't get me wrong, the titans that are in those books have unbelievable work, but maybe it goes to show just, connecting and learning in a different manner, either as opposed to a more academic approach, but more of a practical approach, has been very good for my development. I feel that I've pushed a lot of skills because of the people in our group. Another example I'll throw out there, Aaron Cook. He's building the Mel, and he's got this wicked sweet patina, the legs it's got rust. It's got the splashes that TJ helped him with and told him to, bump up the dirt on it. So those are the type of conversations. Daniel Brooker's another one, Spud, who has sent over countless photographs. The list honestly goes on, but I have found that has been much more valuable and, show tangible progress with those types of conversations, those engagements, as I would with my traditional books. I actually haven't opened a lot of them in a while because I'm getting my fix from online. And I don't know if anybody else has that feeling.
Yeah. Another note is like, we mentioned Ian, the dust he did on his tiger that we all saw at the Nats. We all loved how he did it. So what did he do? He did a video of exactly how he did it.
Exactly.
And I learned more from that video than I've wanted to know how to do dust effects for ages. I've looked through many books, and then 1 5-minute video from Ian. It's like, right, I get it. It makes sense. And it's like the kids we've mentioned, Zach and Jackson. They're really good because when I was their age 3 years ago, I'll fully admit, back when I was a wee lad, I was really bad at taking advice. So with those, if you give them advice or help, they actually take it on and roll with it and work with it and actually take it on board. It's like one of those quotes I think about a lot. Don't take criticism from someone you won't take advice from. I think that goes a lot when it comes to modeling as well. So without sounding at all rude or obnoxious or whatever, but in the hobby, I will only take advice from criticism of my work from someone I would ask for advice.
Well, you know what? I was thinking while JB was talking about the people that we learn from, and that are so much of you are on social media, and some of you actually have written books, like the Sam Dwyer, who reminded me on this Achilles that I missed a lifting eye on the right side of the turret, and he wasn't wrong. So I will be running with that and adding a lifting eye to the right side of the turret. One more question. What do we do when we see something that is so amazing? How do we take what could be intimidating and yet let it be inspirational instead?
I mean, I'll kick us off. Classic example, Night Shift. I mean, everything he does is inspirational and sometimes downright intimidating, especially if it was water. But, that's just one example of many, I think, that the way he lays it out. Again, I think it comes down to the community as well and the encouragement that your friends are doing. Like, I can't tell you how many times someone has posted either in the group or a private chat, like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, but it's really crazy and I don't know how I'm going to pull it off. And I think everyone literally echoes the same. STFU, get at it, do it, and crush it. And I think that's just the mentality that I take a lot of times too. You just got to try it.
Well, I'm going to jump in and say, I think, JB said Night Shift. I like Rick Lauer. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a fantastic model builder, and his style of model building really resonates big with me. He's very professional the way he's a super nice guy. I've never met him in my life, but I know JB and Scott met him up in Seattle last year. And what I've heard, is just as nice as he is on the videos. Another thing I like about him is he's jumping around. He's a fantastic armor builder. In my opinion, one of the best. But he's also doing Warhammer stuff now. Odds and ends. He's doing buildings. He's making colorful things. And it's just seeing that and the community that he's bringing around himself now is very positive and very fun to be around. I'm sorry to be a fanboy, Rick, but you're one of the big reasons I'm back in the hobby, because a couple of years ago, or about 4 or 5 years ago, I was out of the hobby and I saw your Russian tractor you did on YouTube, and that was the only video you posted for a long time. And that 4 or 5 part video kept me going for a long time. So that's what I like about it.
And maybe another point is shows themselves. I mean, you can point to the IPMS Nationals as one where there's countless things on the table that are incredibly intimidating. I mean, you look at Greg Solar's dioramas, some of the sci-fi work that was there. Honestly, the scratch build cruiser ship that the California gentleman does, again, something that's totally intimidating. But when you sit there and you can look at it and just try not to get overwhelmed in a sense, maybe, and pick it apart piece by piece. Start with, I don't know, how the base coat looks, how the weathering is, what parts did he use to scratch build. And I think if you take it, slowly, step by step, you can break it down and help process, this is how I would do it, and maybe help you to execute.
Well, that was a good talk, guys. Now remember, you can leave us feedback, ideas, or even hate mail, gasp, etc. at plasticpossepodcast@gmail.com.
That gasp was marvelous.
Almost as good as your moan in the end of the tweet.
That gasp proper threw me for a minute.
Yeah.
Like that?
That was marvelous.
Please tell us about your Posse experience and how the great people over on our page have inspired you, pushed you to help you improve.
And remember, there's no wrong way to enjoy the hobby. So take care, and most of all, build models.
Yeehaw!
I was awoken at 5 a.m. I only managed to book 30 rooms. I feel like I really missed out on an opportunity there, but they'll be for sale a week before now.
Ivan, good thing you live across the pond, because if you were here in the States, thered be a caravan headed to your house. So
hold your horses.
Whoa, Bessie.
Horses.
Horses.
Watermelon. Cantaloupe.
Cantaloupe.
Okay, let's see.
Zucchini.
Margheriti. Grilled cheese with tomato soup.
Wow.
Chicken wings, hold the bones.
Chicken tendies.
Who am I? I don't like bones in my meat.
Damn.
Holy smokes. I'm
Ivan,
sorry, guys.
Ivan, we need a Gordon Ramsay to get Doug back on track.
Boy, come on, big boy. Get yourself fucking organized. Came to
Super
the
nice
drover
guy.
with us, didn't he?
Yeah.
The drover.
The drover.
Yeah, I keep-
Absolutely fantastic.
Scott's gonna be like, what happened?
He doesn't know how much of this to edit. Just release this. I'd pay to listen to this.
This is how we sound when we StreamYard just in ourselves.
This is why you join us. Okay.
Gorlami.
Buongiorno.